Welcome, and thank you for choosing to spend part of your day with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation for our signature event, Talent Forward. This year, we did something a little different, and for the last 6 months, you've welcomed us into your offices and homes to discuss the most pressing education and workforce topics. Today is the capstone to this virtual series, and we're going out with quite a lineup. You will hear from corporate CEOs, policymakers at the federal and state level, philanthropic leaders, and nonprofit visionaries. Each one has a story to tell about the monumental challenges they are overcoming to connect job seekers to jobs and ensure our economic recovery remains on track. While COVID-19 has made everything in our lives more difficult, the challenge of people without jobs and jobs without people was here long before. But I believe the pandemic has forced us to be even more bold, to not just recover what was lost over the last 20 months, but to do better, to come together, the private sector and public sector, to create greater opportunity for all. I'm thrilled for today's discussion, and I hope you'll find concrete solutions as well as a little inspiration. I want to take just a moment to thank our sponsors for making this program possible. Deloitte, IBM, and Tutris have each been fantastic partners. We're grateful that they are in the arena with us, being bold and tackling these issues head on. We appreciate your active participation in today's discussions and hope you will engage with us in conversation via Twitter and LinkedIn using our @USCC Foundation social handles and the hashtag #TalentForward. And now it is with great pleasure that I introduce to you the U.S. Chamber of Commerce President and CEO, Suzanne Clark, and Siemens Corporation President and CEO, Barbara Humpton. We're honored to have them. Both have prioritized workforce as leaders of their respective enterprises and have used their considerable influence to advance solutions to the workforce shortage. Thank you both so much for being here to kick off Talent Forward, and I'll turn it over to you.
Cheryl, thank you very much for that introduction and for producing an important topic, an important event on an important topic. And Barbara, it's always great to see you. At the U.S. Chamber, we represent small businesses, large businesses, every industry, every sector. And when I talk to CEOs all across the country, they all bring up one pressing concern, and it's finding qualified workers. So tell us what they might learn from you and how Siemens is doing in filling the jobs of today and tomorrow.
Suzanne, thanks for the opportunity to be here. And for those in the audience who don't know Siemens, I'll just let you know that we are folks who have skills in electrification, automation, digitalization. We're working in industries, in infrastructure and transportation. And so as you can imagine, we have the need for skilled workers in a wide range of fields. And I won't belabor many things that I know all of us are working on, but let me point to something that's rather unique about us. We are actually headquartered in Germany, and it's a country that's known for its apprenticeship model and technical education. And we've now been taking the concepts, that German approach to apprenticeship, and then implementing it with an American accent here in the US. Think about being able to form partnerships with educational systems like community colleges, and then building hands-on programs that give people the opportunity, whether they're starting out a career or whether they're shifting to a new career in the midst of it all, give them the opportunity to learn the skills they're going to need. We think this can scale. And what I'm excited to see is, as we've been building our relationship with K through 12, one of the things we're focused on is extending those apprenticeship programs into high schools. So now in Wendell, North Carolina, where we're committed to building additional electric vehicle car chargers, we've just announced we'll build another 1 million over the next few years. We need workers both in Wendell and elsewhere in the country. And a new apprenticeship program with Wake Technical Community College is actually helping us do that with high school juniors.
So, Barbara, that's so interesting. And I think it addresses a number of questions and issues you and I talked about even before the pandemic, right? Because this worker shortage existed even before the pandemic. But the pandemic certainly made things worse. And we see in our own surveying all kinds of reasons that employees aren't coming back as the economy reopens, maybe in the way that we had hoped. And some cite shifting life priorities, some cite ongoing health concerns or early retirement. What are you seeing in terms of getting employees back to work post the pandemic?
Yeah, wow. At Siemens, we have a wide variety of roles. Some are absolutely frontline. And I would tell you a full 40% of everyone who works here in the US for Siemens is on the front line in one way or another. So people coming into factories every single day, people going into hospitals or transportation systems. And we are relying on those folks. We as a society are relying on those folks. And one of the cool things about what we get to do is there is a very deep sense of purpose embedded in that. Now, what about the employees who have flexibility? Maybe they're not required on site. What we've decided to do is embrace flexibility. You hear a lot of people talking about sort of mandatory back to work. That hasn't been our goal. Our goal has been to give people the flexibility to work wherever they are most effective. And, you know, over these last few months, as people have been discussing the Great Resignation, actually, the thing I've started talking about with our leadership team is, could we turn this into the Great Reassignment? If it's true that people have really, in these last months, searched their souls and decided they really want to be doing something different, well, maybe different could be offered right here within the Siemens Corporation. Perhaps there's someone who has been doing a job in software development and wants to switch into a cyber role. Maybe there's someone who's been a frontline technician who would like to get into the field of finance. We have the ability to make all of that happen within our walls. And I think our leadership team needs to be open to the idea that right now, it is a seller's market for talent. And so if we want to retain our very best, we'll be wise to listen to what they're asking for.
You know, when you think about another pandemic-related topic, it's women, and that the pandemic hit women disproportionately hard, that women are leaving the workforce at a somewhat alarming rate. And so my question to you is, how are you thinking about using the flexibility you just talked about and other tools to make sure you're retaining women, particularly as you strive to get more women into leadership roles?
Yeah, we have had a huge focus on getting women into leadership roles. And you can imagine when you know, we're already in an environment where there's not as large a percentage of women going into the technical fields where we do the kind of hiring. So we've really had to challenge ourselves to think differently about the roles and the sources of talent. And you look at the fields we work in and you see the same story playing out over and over again. I had the opportunity to talk to Carolyn Lee of the Manufacturing Institute, part of the National Association of Manufacturers. And she points out this nationwide shortage of 800,000 people needed in manufacturing. And when you start looking at the underlying data, you realize, wow, if we could close the gender gap by only 20%, we could close the overall, hiring gap in manufacturing by close to 50%. In other words, there are women out there, and if we could only tap into their talents, we could take giant strides forward. Now, how do we go about this? What we've decided is that perhaps we've been looking for talent in the wrong places. And we've made an effort to reach out to different organizations. For those who aren't familiar with Fairy Godboss or Boss Maker, These are both organizations who are tapped into talent networks and who've been able to help our recruiting organization reach an audience who perhaps didn't even know about Siemens. And I'd say people who haven't thought about entering the fields that our customers care so much about. This is a moment when, whether it's manufacturing or whether it's in some of the other pure infrastructure things we're involved in, we're actually seeing a digital transformation everywhere. And we have seen plenty of women entering into fields that call for digital talent. And so you think about all the talent that's been dedicated to, oh, I don't know, entertainment and our retail lives in the digital disruption of the last few years. And if you think about how many of those people could actually turn their talents to the work of this new infrastructure world we're dealing with, it's an exciting time where I think we will see people migrating into our fields. Now, I mean, we started this, and Suzanne, you asked the question about flexibility and aligning it with the needs of women. And it's true that a lot of women have been bearing responsibility for family care. But what we're discovering is that parents need this kind of flexibility. Both men and women want the opportunity to be more flexible in working hours and to be more flexible in work location. One of the things we've even discovered is you might think that that factory job that required a first, second, and third shift, gosh, it's just too rigid. And who would sign up for that these days? Well, I'm proud to say that our leaders in our factories have actually turned on to the idea that maybe they have more flexibility than they thought. Why do we go with pure shifts? Isn't it possible to create more flexible arrival schedules and departure schedules so that we can actually tailor the needs, tailor to the needs of the workforce at that location? These are exciting times where people are questioning everything.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I have 11 follow-up questions to that. Let me ask you a little bit of a lightning round. Let me ask you to pick up on a thread you put down there about STEM. And we know that something, less than 20% of engineers are women, or fewer than 20% of engineers are women. But really, we need more people of both genders going into STEM related fields. So you talked about K through 12 education and partnerships with community colleges. What can the rest of us be doing to get more people into the STEM fields?
Yeah, I mean, all of us who have children ought to be encouraging them to, take as much science and math as they can get in their high school education. And that, of course, lays down a solid foundation. Suzanne, I'll tell you, encourage your kids to play video games. What you'll find is that the tools of engineering are becoming very interactive. And so that the skills we develop as we play games today are going to translate directly into the kind of work that needs to be done in the engineering framework of the future. I know it's counterintuitive, but trust me on this. This is an exciting time when engineering is going to become a lot more fun. Then I'll tell you one other thing. I'm encouraging people to think about their careers differently. Careers now are going to last decades longer than we might have assumed when we were youngins. And, here I am closing out 40 years in a career, hoping for another good, decade or two ahead of me. And it's never too late to get started. These days, a lot of educational institutions are offering stackable credentials. We can take a course here, a course there, and pretty soon, you know what? We've got the qualifications that it'll take to actually earn ourselves a position in some technical field that we might have thought was out of reach for us. Now is a time to shape our own futures.
I love that. Now is the time to shape our own futures. I think we all need that on our next great t-shirt, just to remind us. So Barbara, let me ask you a question. You talked about flexibility on your factory floors and thinking about shifts in a new way, et cetera. And I think some of the people that are watching might be intrigued by that, but think, wow, that's a big company solution and I'm a small company. And so talk to us about how you collaborate with smaller companies and how they can learn from the experiences you're having.
Well, first of all, let's question what is a big company. A big company is nothing more than the aggregation of a whole lot of teams. And it's always, two or three strong leaders making a decision to do something differently, and then being empowered to go make change locally. Oh, this is the key lesson from the pandemic, that we can't rely on command and control systems. We have to create lightweight frameworks and give people who are close to the issues we're dealing with the freedom to do what's right in their situation. Now, when we deal with small companies, and we do, a huge network. In fact, this week we'll be celebrating our Supplier Diversity Awards. And it's always so much fun to meet those suppliers who have really stood out from the rest of the crowd. And what we're finding is that those innovative suppliers who get very focused on, hey, what is the customer need? What am I actually delivering? And then questioning everything else, really not taking anything for granted, but questioning those premises and assumptions gives them the ability to be creative.
That's so interesting, because we talk about this a lot, that it isn't really big companies and small companies, it's an ecosystem. And you're talking about the ways that you can learn from the agility of some of your smaller suppliers. I think that's an important lesson. So Barbara, as always, I could talk to you forever. These issues are so important, and you're a leader in this field. What a great way to start this talent forward conversation. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for convening on this really important topic.
And thanks to all of you for joining this important conversation. You know, the future of our workforce is a lot to do with the future and security and competitiveness of America. So thank you very much.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us for this portion of the conference. We're going to be talking about worker shortages with three people who have their fair share of firsthand experience addressing these issues. I have Sean McGarvey, president of the North American Building Trades Union with me, as well as Christopher Griffin, the CEO of the USG Corporation, and Judaline Cassidy, who's founder of something called Tools. And TR is an awesome organization that I'm excited for you guys to hear a little bit more about. You know, I'd love to start first off with Chris. You know, our question for you: even before the pandemic, construction was having its fair share of trouble filling open jobs critical to your business. What are some of the strategies that you've been trying to overcome this worker shortage?
Hey, Eleanor, good afternoon. Thanks for having me. And yeah, you're absolutely right. USG, we've been a leading manufacturer of building materials here in North America for over 120 years. So you would have thought that prior to COVID, we've probably seen everything at some stage. And certainly after we got through the initial, how do we keep our employees and customers safe? It's then how do we keep our operations going so that we can continue to provide the highest quality products like sheetrock wallboard to our customers. And so that's been the challenge. And as everybody on the call knows, working through this pandemic has been hard on everyone. And even before COVID-19, our industry has had huge shortages of labor, especially in skilled trades. And so the pandemic has only made a bad problem worse. But one thing that has been clear during the pandemic, and I think that has been a result of COVID-19, is that it is very clear now that construction is an essential service and an essential industry. And it creates a great number of really high quality, high paying jobs for millions of Americans. And what's great is that even in a period of a pandemic, we are continuing to build across America. You see it in every city, you see it in every town. There are cranes, construction is booming. And I'm so proud of our industry, how we have used safety and innovation to respond and continue not only to survive, but to thrive. But it's not without challenges, right? And the millions of people in construction have been really building and enabling a lot of the essential services that we have needed to respond to COVID, whether it's hospitals, shelters, testing facilities, all of those things that have to be built. Our industry has done that. So what are the things that we're looking at USG? We're thinking about three trends, really. One is around innovation of products. The second is taking advantage of trends that are existing and have been amplified during COVID. And the third is training for our industry. So just real quick, one on innovation products. How do we make things easier and faster for people to work on the job site? That is the guiding principle of all of our innovation at USG. The second is, what are some of those trends? We've seen the trend of panelization and modular accelerate during COVID because it makes sense just to make it faster and more efficient on the job site. So we're going to continue to support that. And lastly, it's around training. We've been around a long time. We're known for people who train our industry, and we've had to digitize all of that. And we have literally trained thousands of our own people and taken advantage of this time to do that digitally. And thousands and tens of thousands of hours of our customers have been trained digitally during COVID. So those are the things that we're trying to do in the short term to respond.
Awesome. You know, Judeline, connecting young people and girls in particular to skilled trade learning opportunities, we know can be a challenge, and yet early exposure is so important. What have you seen that works to get young girls specifically interested in what can be really fantastic career opportunities in industries that are clamoring for talent? And, you know, how does that differ from strategies for adult women?
Well, I would say, first of all, we actually have to put physical tools in girls' hands. And I've found that the girls really respond to that. They love finding out about unions, and they love that we really let girls do plumbing, sheet metal, ironworking, carpentry. We physically put tools in girls' hands. And that empowers them to another degree that they realize, like, wow, I can do anything. And we know that 50% of the girls are valedictorians. So we need to get those girls into the union and into companies, because 50% of them are doing that. And we know that the same thing works with women. So like, for example, Penelope Amaya was one of the girls who actually came to our welding workshop that was held at my plumber's local union 1. That was her very first workshop. And she writes, you can find it on the internet if you search. She pens a beautiful story. She can actually be an author of what it was walking into that union that day and how it changed her life. Now Penelope is enrolled in a CTE school studying engineering, and she continues to be part of Tools and Tiaras. We found the same thing with women. Our women's committee in New York City, we hosted an event where we actually let women install plumbing. We showed them like a faucet, and 6 of those women who came to that event actually are apprentices now. So it really works that we have to put the tools in their hands and support organizations that are actually doing that. If we want to change the mind of girls, their parents, the community, and the country, because listen, we do this. This is what we do every day. And we really, really are the force behind what America is. And I want that to be on the forefront. And that's what I do with girls. And this year at our camp, the girls were really, really concerned about salary. They never asked that before. Every tradeswoman, every person who came on, it was, what do you make? And they were really impressed by our salaries. So I think just being very open and letting the girls know that, and women know that we want them, and really prove it by our actions, will make a big change.
So you just touched on this a little, but is there anything else you want to add for the employers and the educators in the audience about how to get more of a focus on women as a talent pipeline for the trades?
Yeah, definitely. We really need to invest in the schools and also invest in the parents, because we have to, a lot of kids that are from minority communities, a lot of these young men and women don't go on to college because they are the breadwinners. Right? But what if they join apprenticeships? They get to still be a breadwinner and also get another degree working with the unions and companies. So I think really being strategic and saying, if you want to have women who look like me, sound like me, who are an immigrant, who grew up really poor, would never achieve what I've done without being part of a union, why don't you send the enforcements like me? Send me. We change their minds, and they need to see that, because we can say we we want you, but are we really showing you we want you? And they need to see more amazing people like me and the amazing men and women in the building trades. And that's one of the ways. And also really target policy. We can't just let guidance counselors think that the only way is college. We have to let them also show that the trades is the next best way. That's what I believe. So it's just unbiased. It's a biased opinion because I love being a plumber. I've been in these two committed relationships my whole life, plumbing and coffee. So I really love that.
Sean, your organization, the North America Building Trades Union, has also contributed to recruit more women in the trades, as well as veterans, young people using apprenticeships. So you recognize the need to find more pathways into the industry. From your perspective, I mean, what are some additional ways that unions and the business community can partner with one another to connect talent to careers?
Well, thank you. And thank you for the panelists I get the pleasure of participating with. And I would say first and foremost, you get Judaline out there, okay, to show them what can be done and how it can be done. Because we've recognized in order to deal with the demographics of the construction industry, the unionized construction industry, we have to work a little harder to attract people into the trades. We put a special emphasis, and Judaline's been there for Trade Women's Build Nations, which is an annual big conference that all the women trades folks from around North America gather. We sponsor it. They have workshops. They bring in the newest apprentices to retired women who spent 40 years in the craft and show them what can be possible. Now, we think there's some fantastic opportunities right now to ramp up. I actually had a board meeting this morning. We're working on a program with our National Women's Committee. Because one of the big inhibitors, not just for women, but predominantly for women, is childcare. And in the construction industry, there could be a concrete pour, that you can't leave while that concrete's being poured and finished. There could be trucks of gypsum that need to be unloaded, and you've got a certain time. And you've also got the restraints on the childcare facility where you've got to pick your child up by 5 o'clock. So my governing board approved us to go forward with the Women's Committee. We're trying to put together a couple of pilots for the construction industry, unionized construction industry, where we're going to operate our own childcare centers, which should hopefully combine with the Biden administration and Speaker Pelosi and Leader Schumer emphasis on the child tax credit. Give them some resources with something that's really unaffordable right now, childcare, quality childcare. Combine that with what we'll put together with our partners in the development, manufacturers, and others to see if we can indeed tap into this great untapped resource of women who are fantastic journey people and mechanics in their trades. And really ramp up our recruitment on the women's side. That's something we have to do in conjunction with our partners and the contractors, developers, owners, buyers of construction services. And on top of that, really figure out by listening to women what accommodations are needed on a construction site to make them comfortable so that they feel safe and productive. We do a lot of training in our training schools now. About sexual harassment and behavior for all people, but specifically men, to make sure it's a welcoming environment, good mentorship, and these folks that we bring in through apprenticeship readiness programs, when they get through that registered apprenticeship system in the building trades, they learn skill sets that last a lifetime. So we are really ramping that up, working with partners, and we've got fantastic partners out there. Some of the member companies of the chamber are really working hard with us to figure out the ways to make it a success and to move more folks through opportunity and training into the middle class in the construction industry.
Well, that's a nice segue to my next question, which is actually for all three of you. How can the public and private sectors and the nonprofit community work collaboratively and effectively to tackle this challenge in the present and prepare for future workforce needs. Chris, let's start with you. I mean, what are your thoughts on how all of these pieces fit together?
Yeah, Eleanor, I could not agree with my colleagues on the call here more, honestly. We need to get tools into people's hands earlier. I'm a great example, and I meet examples like myself every day of people who've had careers. I started hanging sheetrock, and I'm now CEO of a multinational company, right? But I meet people that have had wonderful lives and careers every day, starting in the trades. And in my day, and I don't want to date myself, but in my day, every high school had vocational wood shop, auto, all of those, trade schools within the programs. And, we want to work at grassroots to make sure that kids have a chance earlier in life to get the tools in their hands, because I agree with Judeline, that's key. And then secondly, I think we need to continue to support programs that are successful. We don't need to reinvent the wheel here. We've got two great examples on the call today of programs that train people. How do we help them expand their capacity, expand their geographic reach, so that we can get even more people into the trades? The entire economy depends on this.
And Judeline, what have you learned in your experience that can shed some insight on how we can all collaborate to address this?
Yeah, we definitely, I'm telling you, it started young. It was like a light bulb that went out in my head. And I know I'm going to scare some people on the call, but I teach 6-year-old girls to solder, to weld, to teach them about their cars, and they get excited. And they say, I didn't know I have this option. We teach girls every workshop that jobs don't have genders. And that's what the building trades is. And I think we can support more women to come in and stay by some of the things Mr. Garvey spoke about. We really need childcare. A lot of the mothers actually come and then they become interested in the trades and wanting to do it when they find out. And I mean, like he said, I started off in trade school in Trinidad and Tobago doing plumbing. But when I came here, I was a housekeeper and I was a nanny. And the union changed that for me. And that's what we need to do, because we have 51% of the population. We need to get them these jobs. And also by getting them these jobs, they are changing communities. They are changing people's lives. Like, who would have thought? The guy who helped me get into the union, he never knew that I would then do what I'm doing right now, being so passionate about the trades. And I think we are the most awesome people in the world. That's just me. And I want little boys and girls to grow up that. But we need to support the trade schools. In New York City, I've gone to a lot of them, and a lot of them need help from corporate and from the unions to get better equipment. There was a plumbing program that was going to be canceled, and I had to get guerrilla, like union, go into the, making people email the school and teachers and the governors, everybody else, to save that plumbing program. And it was saved, but the students didn't have the good equipment to work with. Supply House stepped in and they got help. But that's what we need to do. Let's go back into school. Make these kids realize that the trades is exciting. We are moving forward with technology, and come and join us, because what we're doing really makes a difference, that they can have a skill. They can move anywhere in the world and always have a job. And like I say to people all the time, you're going to need a plumber before you need a lawyer. I'm just saying.
Sean, I know that you touched on this a little bit, but is there anything you want to add about how the public-private unions can all work together to address this and future problems?
Yeah, it really does take a village, as somebody once said. A tripartite approach to this. We work with some fantastic companies, lots of fantastic companies, and excuse me, to name a few. Southern Company down in Georgia. We work with Waynesboro County government and the unions, our unions in Georgia, with the owner and Bechtel Construction, to put together apprenticeship readiness programs so that people who lived in that community, who hadn't had a lot of opportunity through that investment that the owner was making, could be trained on the job while the job was going on, and in our schools. And many of them, hundreds have graduated and are full journey people now. We're doing the same thing up in Beaver County, Pennsylvania with Shell on a big project we're building up there. Local governments, One, to create opportunity for their citizens. You've got good corporate citizens that want to raise as many boats as they can with their investments. And we in the trades have the infrastructure in place, 1,600 training centers across the United States. We spend $2 billion of our own dollars every year on our training. We just need jobs connected to the training, because we're not going to train anybody, for jobs that don't exist. That lots of people have been through that for generations. We won't do that. When there's jobs connected, where the owner makes a commitment on labor strategy, the contractor works with us, we work with the community, and we prerequisite numbers of people to get in registered apprenticeship through that investment. And the other thing that is pretty unique about the building trades, it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, it doesn't matter if you're old or young, it doesn't matter if you're tall or small. There's no gender pay gap here. Everybody makes the same. When you're a journey person, you're a journey person. No matter what your gender, everybody gets paid the same. And most times it's a pretty comfortable middle-class lifestyle when we do it right.
All right, team, we got about less than 2 minutes left here. And I have one more question that, as a labor policy reporter, I'd be remiss to not ask you. What role does the government have to play here? I mean, the Biden administration proposed spending about $100 billion in job training as part of Democrats' reconciliation package. How would this money be best spent? And Chris, let's start with you.
I want to go back to what Sean was just talking about. I think it's best spent supporting programs that are already existing. We need to expand capacity, expand the connection between the jobs and the people that are already doing a great job. I don't think we need to recreate a bureaucracy that doesn't exist today. We've got the fundamentals in place, and you've got two examples here on the call.
And Judeline, what about you? What are your thoughts on, what those funds could go to?
I'm with my brothers in this. We already have amazing organizations like the National Building Trades already doing this that works. It's been proven to work, it works, and support nonprofit organizations that are doing that, encouraging young men and women to join the trades. That's where it should go, and they should pass it because it's important. That's what I believe. That's my own belief. And
Sean, what about you?
Yeah, I think two things. I think the expansion of registered apprenticeship, where the predominant construction is predominant in registered apprenticeship. We're 51% of it, our programs, the Pentagon, 24% of it. The rest is made up from all the other different industries. Expand it because it's a model that has worked. And then support those community groups, those tripartite organizations that are trying to put together programs to introduce people into these careers and then get into these training programs.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a thought-provoking discussion. My name is Eleanor Mueller. I'm a labor reporter for Politico, and I look forward to seeing you all hopefully in person sometime soon. Have a great rest of your Tuesday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Eleanor, thank you for a fantastic conversation. We really appreciate you joining us today to lead that discussion. My name's Neil Bradley. I'm the Executive Vice President and Chief Policy Officer here at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And it is my distinct honor today to welcome the Secretary of Labor, Marty Walsh. Many of you may know Marty from his job before he was Secretary of Labor as the mayor of Boston. He had a distinguished track record there, creating economic growth and opportunity and jobs. And one of the ways he did it was he had an open door, whether it was the business community, the local chambers of commerce, or trade representatives and unions. He was always available to figure out how we came together and solved problems. It's been especially pleasing to report that in his 10 months on the job here in Washington, D.C., he's brought that exact same approach, joining members of the Chamber of Commerce to learn about the workforce shortage crisis that they're experiencing, and engaging about how we can find solutions. So Secretary Walsh, thanks for everything you've been doing, and thanks for joining us today.
Neil, thank you for having me today. It's exciting to be here. I want to just thank everyone watching today in the panel before us today as well. It's great to see some good conversation about what's happening. I just want to take a moment. I want to use my personal privilege here to congratulate the winner of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Small Business of the Year Award. It's a great wine shop in my hometown of Boston, Massachusetts, the Urban Grape. I want to congratulate you. Urban Grape is a Black-owned, women-owned business. Hadley Douglas and TJ Douglas do incredible work training and mentoring a diverse workforce, and that's what we're here to talk about. So I want to congratulate you guys as well before we get into the conversation.
Well, Secretary, I was mentioning those great businesses started in Boston, and that's a perfect example. And today we're going to talk about how we help those businesses, small, medium, and large, get staffed. I want to dive right into your portfolio as Secretary of Labor. For quite some time, the department has managed workforce job training programs, but the labor force is in a different place than where it has been historically. I'm wondering how you think those programs are going to change and evolve in light of our current challenges in terms of connecting people with jobs and getting them the skills that they need for the jobs that are open today.
Yeah, there's no question about it. We heard a little bit, we caught the last couple questions in the last panels. Workforce development job training is going to be key to our future. When the president filed his bipartisan infrastructure bill, firstly known as the American Jobs Plan, American Families Plan, incorporated was jobs, physical jobs, rebuilding roads and bridges and railways. And in the Build Back Better reconciliation package, there's investment in workforce development. And I really think that we have a unique opportunity at this moment in time, particularly in light of what we're seeing from the pandemic with worker shortages around the country, opportunities for people looking to change careers, better their place in society, get into the middle class. We really have, I guess I would say, I turn the positive spin, once in a generation opportunity to make a long-lasting change in the workforce of America by scaling them up. Yesterday, I was in Ohio yesterday, and I was at the Ohio Chamber, and we went to a technology company, actually the Cleveland Chamber, I should say, and we were at a high-tech company, Fit Technologies, and we were talking about creating pathways for people in the technology space. So we have real opportunities right now in our country to do some amazing things.
So, one of the things that we often talk about is the jobs that are open today and trying to get people into those positions. And when there's a skills gap, the lag in people helping and people acquiring those skills contribute to someone being unemployed longer and the position being unfilled longer. Are there things that we can do, or things that our employers can do to help speed up the skill identification and acquisition process?
Well, yeah, I think one area is we have two broad areas of focus, I think. One is first, modernizing our national workforce system and expanding it to more industries. I think that's going to be key. So we connect workers to more in-demand jobs. I think that's something. And secondly, is increasing equity and diversity in the terms of who can access these programs. As was just mentioned before, registered apprenticeships is a great example of how we're advancing these skills. Apprenticeships work for workers because they can earn wages while they're training and get the supports they need. So we get people into the workforces. Apprentice works also works for employers because it's driven by jobs that they can have open in the workforce challenges that they face. So we do have that opportunity right now. I think that there's no question about it. And we need to invest in job training strategies as a country. I think that, again, I think yesterday when I was talking when I was at the technology company, we were talking about, everyone's like, what's the government going to do? What's the government going to do? What's the government going to do? And quite honestly, Neil, you mentioned in your opening remarks, I reached out to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce because in Boston, myself and Jim Rooney had an amazing relationship. I was known as a labor guy. I was the mayor of Boston. I supported unions. I supported businesses, and we had some amazing success. And we need to continue to have those conversations. It can't be one side or the other.
And I think that's exactly right. We have to, this is not a problem that either side, labor or business, is going to solve on their own. We're going to have to solve it together.
And quite honestly, I just real quickly, I look at it through the lens of, we don't have sides here. We have one goal. We have one goal to make our company successful, make our workers successful, allow workers the opportunity to get into the middle class, earn good livings. And what we have to do is we have to be real intentional also about making sure that diversity is at the forefront of all that we do. Because too often people of color and women have been left behind, and we're seeing it play out all across this country during the pandemic. And we have an opportunity to change that dynamic moving forward.
So I want to shift gears a minute, and a topic we've talked about in the past, but it's certainly at the forefront of many of our members' minds, is the issue of immigration and understanding how legal immigration can contribute to meeting our nation's workforce needs. The Department of Labor plays an important role, particularly when there are worker shortages in a particular area. How do you think about the issue of immigration and legal immigration contributing to our overall national workforce?
Certainly, it's an important issue for our country, and as a son of immigrants, this issue is obviously very personal to me, and it should be for most Americans. If we look back, if anyone looks back at their family's history, there's a good chance that their families came from somewhere else. Immigrants have always helped drive our economy, and given us a competitive edge here in the United States of America. And as you know, a lot of people know the president introduced a comprehensive immigration reform package his first few days after taking office. This bill would allow the American economy to grow and strengthen and help our competitiveness around the world, and while preventing unfair competition here in the United States. That balance will be crucial if we want to ensure long-term economic stability. The Department of Labor also administers a program called the PERM program, and several guest worker programs, H-1B visa program, H-2A visa program, and the H-2B. So our door is open if anybody wants to share their conversations. And I'll just say one other thing. For some reason, immigration has turned into a political issue, and it really has never been. It's always been agreed to and supported bipartisan. And as I go around the country, particularly when I talk to big businesses, every single business in America that I've spoken to is all about comprehensive immigration reform, finding a pathway for the folks in this country that are undocumented, and creating a system moving forward. Our college universities in this country educate young people from all over the world, and after we're done with them, they go back home because they have no pathway here. Why are we letting that brain drain go out of this country when we could actually keep them here in the United States and move our country forward?
Well, you're exactly right, and count the U.S. Chamber in on that. A lot of our audience today, as they're dealing with open positions, are trying to evaluate whether this is a kind of a temporary situation or this is kind of part of a new normal. And we know kind of pre-pandemic, one of the things that we heard most often from employers was a tight labor market even then. That's obviously been exacerbated by the dislocations caused by the pandemic. One of the things the Department of Labor does is looks at labor force projections and things into the future. I'm wondering if you can share what the Department of Labor sees in terms of the future, the tightness of the labor market, where talent is going, just to predict a little bit about where we'd be if we were gathering in 3 or 4 years.
Oh, thank you. I'll probably get myself in trouble, make some news here today, but certainly this has been a topic for me pretty much, not necessarily the first days of being the Secretary of Labor, but as time went on, certainly the months of August, September, October, November, obviously heading into November. The perspective of the Department of Labor is that we're focused on supporting people getting back to work safely, supporting the growth of the labor force in the long run, something that we need to do. But we are coming out of I think we have to realize and keep it in focus reality that we're coming out of a once in a century pandemic. And what we're doing won't happen overnight. It's going to be a process. People, I think, are taking a fresh look at the job market, their goals, their families' needs. Some people are just burnt out of the work they were in the past, or they're traumatized, especially many of our essential workers. When I say traumatized, they've gone through a lot of stress this year. Many have decided that low wage, poor working conditions aren't worth threatening their health or family over. And people are considering the importance of childcare. And clearly we have a system in childcare that we need help, wages, their benefits, opportunities to advance their retirement. So we're looking at all that. We think about the pandemic hitting people of color and women the hardest. The numbers don't lie, they tell you the truth. So we need to, this is what I think we need to do. We need to make sure workers need to be safe. They need to make sure they have opportunities for dignified jobs with good living wages. They need to access job training to grow their careers. This is certainly essential to address our current labor market and strengthening our workforce in the future. And I think that, with the president laid out the Build Back Better agenda, really about training opportunities, workers moving forward. So if I'm looking to a crystal ball, your question was, to give you a short answer of the long one I just gave, I think over this next 6 to 8 months, we will see a major change in our country, but the change is going to be forever, meaning that workers are going to be expecting more. They're going to be looking for higher wages. But I think also companies will understand and appreciate their support. They will also have dedicated workers working for them. So we have work to do, and we just have to get through this pandemic. And the last thing I'll say, I think our time is up. If you haven't been vaccinated, get vaccinated. I know I'm not supposed to say that, but I'm saying it because we can't go back to what it was. I just want everyone just for a minute think about March of 2020 and what happened when we shut everything down in this country. We don't want to go back to that. We want to continue to move forward.
Well, Mr. Secretary, I'm glad you said it. I'm going to echo it. Get vaccinated if you're not vaccinated. If you qualify for a booster, get the booster. Thank you so much for joining us today. As you said, we have a lot of work to do, and we look forward to doing that work with you. Thanks so much for taking a few minutes and spending them with us today.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Chamber.
Hi, I'm Lisa Rabaska-Roby, and I'm a freelance journalist with Fast Company. And I'm joined by Chris Sharkey from Corning Inc. and Alexandra Lazama from Tutris. And I'm going to jump right into the conversation about childcare. I'm going to ask each of you how childcare barriers affect our workforce daily, and why this issue is so important to the business community. Chris, would you like to start?
Sure, thank you, Lisa, and hello, everyone. Yeah, I think following the Secretary's comments there about how childcare is so important to workforce, I think what the business community recognizes, especially after the last year and a half, that it's absolutely a foundational need for workforce. The challenge in the childcare space is we talk about quality, affordable childcare, but in fact, in most places, those two don't exist together. And parents are forced to choose. If they can't afford a certain program, they'll go to a program that has lesser quality, and that creates workforce issues because those parents will make a choice, have to make that very difficult choice, whether they're going to continue working or have their child in a safe environment. On the other hand, quality programs are very expensive for most parents. So how we reconcile those, bring those two things together is really important. We also know that it is a critical factor in decision-making for potential employees. Folks aren't just making decisions based on the job content or salary. There are a lot of other factors that play into that decision. So removing as many barriers as we can for parents is going to be essential in the workforce landscape going forward.
Alexandra, can you talk a little bit about the barriers, the childcare barriers facing the workforce?
Absolutely, and delighted to be part of the conversation. I echo absolutely everything that Chris just said, and really just bringing perspective to the 4 pillars of economic development, right? So we need jobs, and we need housing, and we need transportation, but without childcare, nothing else happens because it's the sticky glue that holds all of our communities together. If working parents don't have the very comprehensive need met of having their children in a great program where they have peace of mind, they're simply not going to be productive. So I think that prior to COVID, there was already a high level of awareness from employers as to the impact of lack of childcare. Actually, employers lose more than $57 billion a year due to loss of employees, right? The lack of retention, just absentee absenteeism, lack of productivity, but certainly navigating COVID, this percolated to very top of minds. As employers, I'm an employer, but I've also been a single mom working my way up from the sales floor to the boardroom, and have firsthand experienced how difficult it is to get myself to work if I don't have that peace of mind that my son was in a great place. So, the challenge is, what is it? 6 of these and half dozen of the other. It's even as an employer, when you recognize how critical childcare solutions are to have that high productivity from your workforce, it's really difficult as an employer to take action. So there's so many things that are so broken about our childcare system. And I'm sorry that I'm so blunt about it, but our childcare system has failed our working families, our communities at large, and especially our youngest ones. We know that very early in the first 5 years, children absorb most of their information and their brain develops the most. 90% to be exact of a child's brain develops between the ages of 0 and 5. And we as a nation have not recognized how important it is to set up working parents to ensure that they have the availability that is convenient, that is affordable to place their children in these programs. So the question was, how does it affect workforce? Let me tell you how it affects workforce. It not only affects today's workforce where parents can't go back to work, and especially and disproportionately affecting women that are more prone to stay home and care for the family and not go back to work, but it devastates our ability to develop the workforce of the future, because if our children aren't exposed to these very quality programs in their very early stage in life, we're not setting them up for success, academic success. And so we're not investing in our future workforce. It's all a snowball effect. I like to reference. One thing just leads and compounds into the other. So I truly believe that if there is a silver lining to having navigated COVID and the devastation of so many working parents having to, lock down and figure out how they were going to reinvent their, their work and their lives, the one thing that has come out of this is that employers recognize that if there isn't a solid family unit and solution to their workforce, they're not going to be recovering at the pace that we need. So more and more employers are willing to raise their hand and say, I recognize that childcare is not just a family issue. It's a business issue, and how can I help? And I think that the time is now, and there's many different ways in which employers can contribute, because we can't just expect federal government to solve a problem with, subsidies. That is certainly a great component of it, but there's a lot of other underlying issues that we have to solve in order for everyone to leverage from a well-established, well-thought-out, visionary childcare system into the future.
So, Chris, could you tell us about what your company has done? You're one of those companies that has, in fact, done some innovative things. So can you tell us what it took to create Corning Enterprises childcare portfolio? What kind of buy-in did it take? What type of investment did you have to get from the company for that to happen?
Yeah, so we've had an interesting journey on the childcare front. It actually started 40 years ago, and it started at the very top with our chief executive officer, the late Amo Houghton Jr., realizing that we would never attract women to come work in rural upstate New York without quality childcare. Since then, we've invested in 2 purpose-built centers, and then we subsidized programs to the tune of 25 to 30% of their operating cost, because we've recognized that that's the gap that Alessandro was talking about, which is that creates the program that you feel safe leaving your child there and you can bring your whole self to work. With that said, our world was rocked just like every other business on this call in March of last year when everyone went home. And we did a survey shortly after the pandemic sent us all home and said, what did working parents need? And that was a very interesting survey that came back that said, number one, working parents, women or men, need flexibility. And that is something that is going to continue as we come out of this pandemic and into the future. And flexibility means not just the ability to work at home, but be equipped at home as well. Businesses need to make the investment in technology so that people can stay fully connected there. The other thing we put in place, we're a manufacturing company. We had folks that could not work from home. And so we set up used one of our office buildings, turned it into a virtual learning support center where parents could come drop their kids off into a safe environment, safe supervised environment while they went to work and then pick them up at the end of the day. But, our journey going forward is going to be like many other regions of this country. We need more infant and toddler care. There's no question about it. That is going to be a huge advantage to companies that get out ahead of this and find ways to either incent additional care or help fund training for more family daycare providers. But without an expansion of infant and toddler care, it's going to be a real challenge.
Great. So, Alessandra, a lot of companies feel like offering those types of programs, like the program that Corning is offering, is out of grasp because of the size, the red tape, the amount of effort it takes to create it. What is your response to that? What advice do you have for companies?
So I love the question. It's one of the most important questions that we can be asking the business community. If now they've recognized that family support services are very important for the workforce, what resources are we making available to them to help them provide those? And I could tell you that both my experience as a working mom, having had all the difficulty in finding the right childcare for my son and then affording that childcare, when I became a CEO and I had the opportunity to step in and provide these kind of solutions for my working parents, I found that the challenge as an employer was perhaps even bigger in that, your insurance company may not approve it, or your premiums go way up, and or your board of directors may not want to vote in support of an initiative of this magnitude due to liabilities, or simply the business doesn't have the resources at the HR level to manage and contract with different potential childcare providers to create the capacity that is necessary to place the young children of their workforce. So it's a really gotcha. And so when I founded Tutris, I envisioned a solution whereby we could incorporate all of the different stakeholders, all of those providers that, whether they serve parents in a center-based program that have childcare slots of over 100, or those beautiful, super nurturing, warm, smaller programs in a childcare home, what we call a family childcare home and program, whereby they could all have a product, a platform where they could incorporate all of the program distinctions that are unique to them and make those readily available in real time to parents that are looking to place those children, and in turn providing this platform to employers. So as opposed to them having to think about on-site childcare programs, which is a huge burden on many employers. But even those, that small 7% of employers, of which 15% are in the top 100 corporations across the nation that do provide some sort of on-site childcare program for the workforce, they've got deep pockets, and perhaps they own their own real estate, and so they can do that. But even then, the capacity planning of those slots, and especially going back to what Chris said, whether it's an infant or a toddler or a pre-K age child, right? They don't always have enough capacity for the demand of the workforce. So going back to the type of solution that employers can access today is a technology platform that allows them to tap into hundreds of thousands of different programs that have availability as of when their workforce needs it. And here's the catch. Parents need childcare 24/7, not just daycare 6 to 6, because depending on the type of job that they have and the type of schedule, they may be a nurse, a doctor, in manufacturing, they're going to have all sorts of different types of scheduling. So a unified platform that helps employers incorporate childcare as a benefit without the burden of having to administer the programs and or be part of the day-to-day discipline of childcare, which is a very specialized profession. As we know, we're caring for the most valuable little people in the world, right? Our workforce children. So I'll leave it at that.
Chris, any final thoughts about what employers could be doing or should be doing?
Yeah,
we have just a few seconds.
Yep, and I think Alessandra is exactly right. Going to a center, developing your own center is a big thing to bite off. There are lots of other options that are out there, including connecting employees and family daycare providers. And just remember, employees will always choose the health and well-being of their children over working for you. So get out in front of it.
Great. That was a great way to end it. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Joe Fuller, Professor of Management Practice at Harvard Business School, where I lead our Managing the Future of Work project, and where we study trends in the workforce. And I'm delighted today to be joined by Christoph Tarrant, who is the CEO of Zurich North America. Zurich's a real pioneer in the development of apprenticeships in the US, and we're here today to talk about that. Christoph, you launched your apprenticeship program roughly 5 years ago, 2016, in Chicago, and you've subsequently expanded it to several other locations in North America. What led you to implement apprenticeships as a solution to your talent sourcing, and what do you think has made your program successful to date?
So first of all, thanks for having me here today. And look, the apprenticeship program for us has been absolutely a tremendous experience. I mean, as you said, we started it back in 2016, and we're a Swiss company, and so we've seen firsthand, I mean, what this vocational training model can do in terms of bringing people into the industry, in terms of bringing young people into this industry and giving them really, really meaningful careers. So we took that model and then brought it to the US back in 2016. We started in Chicago, as you said. We've now expanded across multiple other locations in the US, and it's been fantastic for us. I mean, what it really gives us is a 2-year training program where people work 3 days, 2 days they spent on formal training. And at the end of this, I mean, they get a degree, and we have very good retention. So we have these very motivated people that get a practical skill set, I mean, learn how our organization works. And at the end of it, I mean, end up working for us and stay with us. I mean, they've been really, really good talent to bring into the organization.
I'm curious, when you were importing the Swiss model, what were the 2 or 3 things that you had to adapt or change to make it fit in the US context?
Yeah, I think the system works and is proven, and we've seen the success it has had in Switzerland in terms of very low youth unemployment, in terms of bringing that talent in. I think what we're still missing in the US is that we kind of did this initially individually. Yeah. So as Zurich Insurance, I mean, we then broadened this together with a couple of other companies here in the Chicago area and created the Chicago area apprenticeship network. But what we're still missing is kind of that formal recognition, a broader industry-wide led effort, which is really the Swiss system. I mean, you become a learned banker, a learned insurance person, and that degree is very widely recognized. I think the challenge that we still have here in the US is that there's still this barrier around needing a college degree for a lot of jobs, whereas the apprenticeship program is a perfectly valid track for us and has worked really well. So for me, it's really absence of a broader trade association based program and still that broader recognition as well. Those are probably the 2 things that are still missing.
Of course, the essence of apprenticeship programs is work-based learning, and the pandemic has significantly disrupted the patterns of work, the rhythms of work. How were you able to accommodate COVID considerations in preserving your apprenticeship program?
Yeah, one of the things that we started to do even before the pandemic hit, as we moved to different locations, I mean, we also moved some of the formal learning to online learning. And so we worked with an institution in the New York area, but actually provided online classes. So we were actually very well positioned for this online environment. And then at the end of the day, it wasn't any different from the rest of our employees. We all went virtual. Technology worked really, really well. And so we've been able to continue the apprenticeship program throughout this pandemic. And look, don't get me wrong. I mean, at some point, I mean, coaching and getting them to understand the company, I mean, we will bring them back into our facilities. But throughout the pandemic, I mean, it's actually worked quite well to move online.
Do you think you'll take any of the elements that you had to introduce during the pandemic and make them a permanent feature in your program?
Yeah, just in general, no. I mean, just as we look at our ways of working, so a combination of online working and online coaching and online classroom teaching as well, but yeah, still with a physical element. So I think we'll keep that flexibility. It allows us to be broader in terms of location, but we'll still bring the apprentices in for particular training events where it's still good to have people in person.
Well, Christoph, I've been studying skills development and work-based learning for over a decade, and I must say apprenticeship is a term that many American policymakers and business leaders throw about very lightly. They often cite the Swiss system, the German system as things we need to learn from, but there's still fairly narrow adoption of apprenticeship. If there are people in our audience who are considering trying to institute an apprenticeship program, what type of guidance would you give them, and what kind of pitfalls should they be looking out for?
Yeah, look, the overall guidance that I would give is that, I mean, it's been an amazing success for us. Yeah, I think it is just absolutely such a wonderful way to bring in people into this industry. And then also, I mean, bringing people with minority backgrounds into this industry, because what you don't have is that massive barrier of the investment in a college degree. So I don't think there are that many pitfalls. For us, it's been such a great way of bringing in people in areas where we're short of skills, where the market is hyper competitive, and you create a real loyalty. I mean, you've invested in these people, you've given the skill sets they need. Retention is great. Of course, we're only 5 years into this journey, but our experience has been truly amazing. I don't think there are a lot of pitfalls. I think the challenge is going to be more, get the whole organization excited about this, get your senior people, I mean, to understand the value of the apprenticeship program because they need to be bought into it. I mean, they need to create the opportunities for the apprenticeships on where they actually join. But that, I would say, is the only real challenge. I mean, the broader one we discussed, it would be fantastic if this gets broader recognition and moves beyond a single company and much more to an industry-wide or even an economy-wide track for a lot of people.
Any advice as to how to be connecting to educators, whether it's local school districts or post-secondary institutions like community colleges, to try to get them engaged in this effort and excited about it?
Yeah, so I mean, look, we've worked with a couple of community colleges. We're now also looking at how do we expand from the initial associate degree to college level degrees. And so we're now working with other higher education institutions. But I would say by and large, I mean, we found a great willingness on behalf of the colleges to engage with us.
Well, one thing that always motivates American business people is the concept of return on investment, or that a program is going to lead them to have better all-in economics. Anything you can share with us about how the apprenticeship program, how the economics of it compare to your normal open cycle hiring, and what are the key drivers of economic benefit for Zurich?
Yeah, so look, it's hard to put a very specific number on it in terms of ROI, but all I can say is that the payback for us has actually been quite short. I mean, think about this, about 80% of them are still with us. So massive retention when you compare that to college internships. I mean, so retention has been great. And also, I mean, so initially we launched this, particularly in the underwriting and the claims area. We then expanded it to have a cyber apprenticeship. Now, think about how difficult it is to attract people in that sector of the market. So it's just been a phenomenal way to bring in talent. I mean, give them capabilities that are scarce and difficult to come by, and retain them. So, I mean, I'd say it's been an overwhelming success from an ROI perspective.
That also, of course, speaks to the ability of your apprentices, if they ever do choose to look outside of Zurich, that they're going to have tangible skills that are really in demand in the marketplace. So as much as they might be enjoying their employment experience at Zurich, this is not becoming contractual servitude where only Zurich recognizes their skills and therefore they're obliged to stay with you.
You know, absolutely. And look, I think there is a broad appetite across the industry. I mean, you look at the Chicago Apprenticeship Network, I think we now have close to 1,000 companies joining that. So there is definitely a broader appetite. And I think with that, the degrees will become more broadly recognized as well.
Well, this is really part of a broader move that I hope we'll see in the United States of skills-based hiring, and really based on professionally delivered work-based learning experiences with companies of the quality of Zurich. So Christoph Terran, CEO of North America of Zurich, I'm delighted to have had this opportunity to chat with you and share your insights with our audience.
My pleasure.
Discussion on employment for Black Americans and how the private sector is stepping up. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this discussion on employment for Black Americans and how the private sector is stepping up. And if you just heard me repeat myself, my apologies. I think I'm on time here now. My name is Mary Alice McCarthy, and I direct the Center on Education and Labor at New America. It's a real privilege to be here with you today and with this esteemed group of panelists. So thank you to the Chamber of Commerce and to the Center on Education and Workforce. And thank you to our panelists and to all of you who are joining us for this discussion. Today, we're going to focus on the urgent need to address the outsized negative impact of the pandemic on employment opportunities for Black Americans, particularly Black Americans without a four-year degree. Just to give some context, in 2019, Black unemployment hit a historic low of 5%. Then in 2020, the pandemic hit, sending that rate over 16%. And since then, Black unemployment has been consistently higher than it has been for other groups, sometimes even double that of white workers. As we know from the Great Recession and decades of labor market research, long-term unemployment and underemployment have lasting negative impacts on workers, their families, and on whole communities. So ensuring that Black Americans who have been so negatively impacted by the pandemic and frankly have long faced barriers to high quality employment, ensuring Black Americans are able to find their way back into good family sustaining jobs is of paramount importance to our future economic and social well-being. Today, we're going to hear from a group of innovative leaders on how the private sector is leaning into that challenge and what more it can do. Specifically, we're going to hear from Kwesi Mitchell, who is the Chief Purpose Officer at Deloitte, where he's responsible for driving a firm-wide strategy to make Deloitte's commitments to diversity, equity, and inclusion a reality. Next, we're going to hear from Maurice Jones, CEO of 110. If you haven't heard of 110 yet, you'll be excited. It is a groundbreaking coalition of chief executives and their companies who are coming together to upskill, hire, and promote 1 million Black Americans over the next 10 years. And third, we're going to hear from Jamie Marasotis, President and CEO of Lumina Foundation, and a prolific author and commentator on how the United States can better leverage the tremendous talent all around us. So with that, I'm going to turn to you, Kwesi, and let's start with can you share with us what you and Deloitte's, your and Deloitte's perspective on how to improve job options and opportunities available to Black Americans, and some specifics about what you're doing?
Exactly. And I'll start that by just saying one of the primary things that we are actively doing is working with Maurice and 110. We are heavily focused on disrupting the talent pipeline more broadly and providing opportunities for Black professionals, who lack a four-year degree to find pathways to family sustaining jobs. And historically, we've seen so many different things that have prevented opportunities for this particular cohort, from lack of opportunities with respect to high quality education, skill development, work experience, and labor market discrimination. So all of that being said and done, primary item that we're heavily focused on right now is our commitment to 110, including being a co-lead for the Dallas area, where we'll be driving on the ground strategy.
So that feels like a perfect segue to you, Maurice. And can you tell us about 110 and what you think needs to happen to ensure more Black Americans have access to good jobs?
Absolutely. It was nice to be with you and Jamie and Kwesi as well. So 110 is a coalition now of about 60 companies. They've committed to the North Star of hiring and advancing 1 million Black talent who don't yet have four-year degrees into family-sustaining careers and jobs over the next 10 years. And the focus really is working with companies like Deloitte who are committing jobs, who are going beyond that and are committing to actually change and transform their hiring and promotion and human capital practices so that they're focused on skills as the primary way to hire folks and to upskill folks and to promote folks, as opposed to a credential. The companies are forming a community of practice, which is about learning from one another in the areas where they have to be great in order for us to reach this aspiration. And they're sticking at it for 10 years, a decade. Because the goal here is transform the companies, transform in partnership the lives of Black talent and their families, and I'm a naive optimist, transform the country and make it a more perfect union. And so that's what we're about. This notion of focusing on skills is a big piece of what we have to do to make sure that Black talent really has sustainable access to these jobs and careers, no matter what else is going on in the economy.
Wonderful. And that feels like a perfect segue then to how people acquire those skills. And so let's move to Jamie Marasotis of Lumina Foundation. Over the last decade, Lumina has really been leaning into the need for stronger connections between our post-secondary education system and good jobs. And it also has set ambitious goals for increasing the share of Americans with post-secondary credentials. And it followed up on that with a very strong equity imperative across all of its strategic grant making. Jamie, welcome. And can you please share with us how you and Lumina Foundation are working to dismantle barriers to good jobs for Black Americans, how that fits into your grant making strategies and your investments?
Thanks very much, Mary Alice. Yeah, well, first of all, let me underscore what you said, which is that we are describing ourselves as an equity-first organization. This is not a new thing that Lumina Foundation has come to. We've been focused on this for more than a decade. And it's a very important part of our agenda to increase high quality post-high school learning as part of a longer term trajectory of better strengthening the linkage between learning and work. We have a rising demand for talent in the United States. And we know that in order to meet that rising demand for talent, we're going to have to educate a lot more Americans in order to be able to do that. I want to underscore the point, though, that Black Americans have faced enormous barriers to equal educational opportunity that's impeded their chances of being gainfully employed and ultimately more successful. And by successful, I mean not just in terms of making more money, but also building wealth and creating greater social and political power over time. So, our efforts at Lumina Foundation have focused in the last few years on short-term credentials and associate degrees. We think that's important as a pathway to the long-term success that's going to be required, again, particularly for Black Americans and other people of color. And we're trying to do so through a variety of strategies. And I'd like to just underscore one, if I might, because we're proud to have invested in the Chamber Foundation and the work that the Chamber is doing in these regards, particularly the Talent Pipeline Management Academies that are designed for community colleges and sub-baccalaureate program leaders and their employee partners. Part of what we're trying to do is build these career pathways so that they can align these pathways with the credentials that people are earning in community colleges in real time with the in-demand jobs and skills that the actual employment prospects that people will face following completion are facing. So, I'm a big fan of what Maurice and his colleagues are trying to do with 110. Skills are the key to this. I think credentialing people so that they can continue to build those skills over time and continue to get new opportunities so that they build on where they started is increasingly important. And that's going to be particularly important for Black Americans who have faced the barriers that I mentioned earlier.
Thank you. And I'm going to just follow up with that with a question for Kwesi and Maurice to get back to this question of, again, we all agree that what really needs to be recognized are skills, right? And for people to be hired for them. What are you finding are the biggest barriers to making that a reality? What are the barriers both to Black employment, and what are the barriers to this kind of skills-based hiring methodology that you all are promoting?
And what's interesting is if you think about it, a lot of it's habit, right? I mean, fundamentally just taking a step back and looking at the way that we've hired traditionally. And if our preponderance and use of a 4 years degree really to weed out talent through the selection process is really fundamentally necessary for the careers of the future. And so, Mary Alice, when we think about it within our firm, it's evaluating different aspects of, is a 4 year degree required, which we're finding more and more it is not. And then in addition to that, thinking about what are the high growth areas within our specific needs that are skills-based, they're tech-focused, that we can expand our existing hire to train programs and things of that nature to really bring people into the organization.
And I think I would add to that just a couple of things. So I amen to all of what Kwesi said. You have a mindset issue as well, right? You've got this notion of a bias in favor of a credential. And by the way, that bias is a self-inflicted wound. We as a country have been telling our youth, our adults, our parents, hey, got to go get that 4 year degree if you want to make something of yourself. Got to go make sure your child goes to get that 4 year degree if they want to make. Well, guess what? We internalize that message. And so now we got a mindset shift that needs to occur. In addition to that, honestly, is a risk issue, right? If you're a hiring manager, you take a risk on someone with a credential, people will say, and that doesn't work out, people will say, well, that was a prudent risk. You take a risk on someone without a 4 year degree, the traditional credential, and the risk is that people will say, Of course, that was not going to work. And so there's a risk issue here as well. All of this, though, can be overcome by seeing the work of companies like Deloitte who are doing this, doing it well, having success, and sustaining a diverse and a profitable enterprise. And we gotta tell more of those stories.
Great, thank you, thank you. And I want to pose a question to the group then, sort of following up on that. We know that the pandemic had an outsized impact on Black Americans who lost jobs at higher rates. And then we also know that Black women in particular are still not really a part of the recovery, and they have been the group that has lost the most amount of jobs and have recovered the fewest amounts of jobs. According to the latest estimate, employment among Black women there are still 550,000 fewer jobs for Black women today, and 550,000 fewer women are working today than in February of 2020. And even more alarming, among unemployed women ages 16 and over, 41% of unemployed Black women have been out of work for more than 6 months. And of course, that is our marker of long-term unemployment, which I said is a real mark, is a real as we know, sort of a warning sign, because we know from lots of research that long-term unemployment can really have lasting impacts. So I want to ask you all, what are some ways that the private sector should be thinking about the employment for Black women? What is the way the policy community should be thinking about helping the private sector in this space? And what are some things that we just need to be honest and think about in terms of the jobs and what we need to make sure that they come back for Black women? What should we be doing? Any thoughts?
Well, maybe I can start. So, look, first, these gaps are unacceptable, right? So you look at things like the median annual wages for Black women are about $38,000 a year compared to white non-Hispanic men of $61,000 a year. Those gaps, the employment gaps and the wage gaps are simply unsupportable in terms of our long-term prosperity as a nation. So, how do we address the issues that have confronted Black women? Well, we've got to do a better job of addressing things like healthcare, addressing things like family and social supports that are really critical. If I'm right about what I said earlier about the relationship between learning and work, it means that we've got to bring down the barriers of what I call the three-legged stool of barriers that confront Black women and other minoritized populations, right? The academic barriers, the social barriers, and the financial barriers. We tend to think about these strategies, both from a government policy perspective and from a private sector perspective, as one-offs. If we can just do a better job of increasing their financial supports, they'll be able to make it through the system. Or if we can do a better job of providing them with the childcare, the housing support, et cetera, they'll do a better job. But the reality is, you've got to deal with the fact that prior educational experience has been poor, the financial supports are not there, and the social supports are not there. And for Black women, facing these barriers, I think, is an added burden. And the gap between, as I said, Black women and other populations, particularly white men, is very high. So putting our thumb on the scale of increasing opportunities for Black women with increasing academic, financial, and social supports, I think will be very important.
Crazy or Maurice, anything to add to that?
The only thing I would add is I think that we just can't forget what we observed during the pandemic. I mean, look, we should be clear, like there's lessons that we're learning here. Jamie just gave an outstanding series of opportunities that we should be moving forward with. We just can't brush off, like we're on the other side of the pandemic. Let's move forward and return to business as usual.
Yeah, and look, I'll just add this. I'll second the emotions of my colleagues, but also add this. Look, there's an inside game here and an outside game. Inside the companies and the employers, for-profit and not-for-profit, have to understand that they have yet to reach the place where you've got an environment within which Black women can thrive, right? And so I don't want to just point to some of the outside things, and I'm going to talk about those, but there's still, the pandemic has shown, has highlighted that there's more work to be done inside to retain and to make sure that the company is doing what it needs to do to wrap its arm around Black women who are wrestling with both what's happening inside the company and the responsibilities outside. And then to Jamie's point, outside, you've got to make sure that quality childcare is available, right? You've got to make sure that where you're taking advantage of making jobs virtual, that you do so that folks can do the caregiving for families. And that's both children and partner and, frankly, mother and father and grandfather often that Black women are engaged in. We just got to be a more holistic private sector in policy space if we truly going to create the kind of environment in which Black women can thrive through the ups and downs that come from the economy, from health, et cetera. And so that's what I think the pandemic in 2020 has hopefully helped us to relearn, revisit. We still have work to do in all of these spaces.
Fantastic. And I know we are getting down to time here, so I just want to sort of put it out there if there's any final thoughts, again, in particular on this question of retention and career advancement for Black Americans as they get into that first job, moving up. What can companies be doing to hold on and advance their Black workers? That's a question actually from the audience. Any thoughts on that to close us out here?
It's very similar to what Maury said before. It's got to be a holistic approach. There's no silver bullets, and it needs to be thoughtful with respect to all aspects of advancement.
And the pathway for advancement needs to be transparent, and it needs to be contemplated before that person hits the doorway, right? And so a lot of the focus is on hiring and hiring people back. The focus really needs to be on the trajectory of the talent, hiring, upskilling, and advancing. And there needs to be a plan from day one for that journey. It needs to be a journey, not a hire.
All right. Well, that is a wonderful point to end on. Thank you so much to Kwesi, Maurice, and Jamie for this excellent conversation. And I will hand it back over to our friends at the Chamber. Thank you so much, everyone. Great conversation.
Thank you all. Nice to be with you.
Hello, I'm Paul Fain. I'm going to be your moderator for this discussion on employers as the colleges of the future. I'm a journalist covering connections between education and work with a newsletter and a new publication called WorkShift. I'm very excited about our two expert speakers, both of whom have timely and relevant news to discuss here in our brief time together. First up is Ardeen Williams, Vice President of Workforce Development for Amazon. Ardeen has a lengthy leadership track record across the tech industry with roles in product development and marketing, corporate business development, M&A, and HR. Hello, Ardeen.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us. And then Lydia Logan, Vice President of Education and Workforce for IBM, who has decades of expertise in philanthropy, education, public policy, and economic development. Hello, Lydia.
Hello.
So both Lydia and Ardeen have a lot to share, so I'm just going to get right into it. You'll have to look up their bios on your own, but let's start with Lydia. So IBM made a very big announcement earlier this month with a new free career readiness program, including plans to train 30 million people globally. I had to read that number twice. What led IBM to make this level of commitment? And can you give us a sense of how you plan to reach that scale?
Absolutely. So first, I'd like to say thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be here. I years ago worked at the U.S. Chamber, and I'm a big fan of the programs that are run and the employer voice that they represent. IBM is building on a long tradition that it's had in providing skills, training, and cutting edge access to education efforts. Since the 40s, we worked with Columbia University to create computer science as a new academic field of study. In 2011, we launched P-TECH, and so here we are now talking about our skills announcement to help 30 million by 2030. And we'll do that with partnerships. This is a collaborative effort across IBM. There are many departments involved in making this happen. And our CSR team is leading the way with some of the programs that we run: STEM for Girls, P-TECH, and Skills Build. Skills Build is really sort of our primary program in this area, where we are working with partners and offering industry-aligned content, badges, partnerships with high schools on the student side and teachers, and then for community colleges, workforce boards, and other nonprofits for adult job seekers, making sure that we're responsible stewards of the technology and we provide the access to people who are most in need. Particularly after the pandemic, we saw so many people needing to upskill, reskill, shift jobs, and this is our way of making sure that we're providing what's needed.
Thanks, Lydia. So Ardeen, last month, Amazon announced it would pay full college tuition for its frontline US employees, and that's part of the company's long-running career choice skills training program. What's been the reception to that initiative, and how does this complement Amazon's other upskilling efforts?
Well, thanks for having me, and it's great to be here with Lydia with her tremendous experience. So Amazon is the second largest employer in the US, and we have a role to play in creating good jobs. And for us, good jobs comprise three things: a leading wage, so a starting wage of $15 an hour, an average wage of $17 across the US, access to egalitarian benefits for our full-time workers from day one, so medical, mental health, dental, vision, a retirement plan with employer matching, and up to 20 weeks of paid family leave. And then the third piece, which is critical, is the opportunity to add skills to experience so that people can grow a career, whether that's with Amazon, which we hope it is, or elsewhere. And so on the 9th of September, as you said, we announced that we were increasing our investment to $1.2 billion to reach 300,000 of our employees. And what we did with Career Choice, which, just as a quick refresh for folks, is designed to provide the training and skills that our employees need to access in-demand jobs in the local community that pay more than we do and put them on a career path. And what we did was bookended that program. So we added at what I'd call the front end, foundational skills like completing your high school diploma, a GED, and certification in English as a second language, because in many cases, Amazon can be a first stop for people on their job path. The second thing we did was on the other side of the traditional program, which is licensing, credentials, certificates up to a 2-year degree program, was to add that 4-year degree. So what we have now is really a continuum for wherever that employee might be in their educational arc. And it's one of 9 programs, so it fits very nicely. And those 9 programs range from Machine Learning University, which provides graduate level artificial intelligence and machine learning coursework that's created and taught by Amazon engineers for our software development folks to keep them current, to our 9 registered DOL apprenticeship programs in cloud computing and mechatronics. So really a pretty broad range, and things like quick start programs for IT engineers and data center technicians and user experience designers. And the reception internally has been, I'm really proud to say, phenomenal. People wanted choice and career choice, and adding these 2 pieces really helps with that continuum. And we're excited to kick it off in January, when people will be able to access and enroll in those 4-year degree programs.
Well, I appreciate you both so succinctly describing enormously complex and ambitious programs. So the title of this program is about blurring lines between colleges and employers. This is a fast-moving space. There's a lot happening. I gather some folks get nervous when they hear about these boundaries getting a little blurry, apprehensive about it. How do you respond to folks who might not be ready for the shift that your corporations are doing here. And let's stick with Ardeen first. I want you both to get a chance at this one though.
So there is a lot of blur. I mean, the line between tech and non-tech jobs is blurring. So I think that this is, as change happens, it's happening even faster. What I like to say is upskilling is a team sport. I mean, the work that Lydia and IBM do in the community is complementary to work that we do. And it really isn't college or upskilling. I think that question is an oversimplification. As a nation, we simply aren't producing enough STEM graduates to meet the demand, not only for those STEM specific roles, but also for jobs that what we call sit with, right, that are on the edge, where you're requiring more and more technical fluency in HR, law, finance, for example. And so the more companies and schools that work collaboratively to grow that tech pipeline and to improve equity of opportunity and that digital literacy, the better off we all are. And we know that at Amazon, it's not one size fits all. It's always been a hybrid approach. And so we're offering a variety of opportunities to meet employees where they are. And so my belief is that higher education isn't going to go away. I think what we saw, as Lydia said, during the pandemic, entire industries were turned on their head overnight. And people had an opportunity, a need to go reskill, and B, an opportunity to really sit back and think about how they wanted to spend their days. And to focus on something that not only puts food on the table and a roof over their heads, but brings them some satisfaction. And I think that along with the rapid shift to digitization, so the ability to access courses remotely, has really accelerated the change. And I think that there are lots of great educational institutions blazing trails in this area. And so my personal belief, and again, I'm an eternal optimist, is that collaboration between institutions of higher education and businesses large and small is what's going to enable us to scale the workforce that we need for the jobs of today and the jobs of tomorrow.
How about you, Lydia? What would you add now that IBM is ramping up its work in this space?
Well, I want to echo what Ardeen said. This is about an ecosystem of learning. It's not an either or. People don't learn either at a university or in some other setting. They're doing both these days. And when we talk about people acquiring the skills they need for the jobs of today and tomorrow, the STEM jobs that we often call new collar jobs at IBM, it's a lifelong learning play. It is not just train once and be finished, right? We know that about what we all do. And so that requires you to have also flexible options. So you may have time to work on a degree program with a university, but you may need to do a certificate program or some smaller kinds of skilling options that allow you to gain the skills you need to get the next job or to stay current in the job you have. And so I think what we're looking at is, again, not only entry-level jobs, but training, right, skilling and upskilling for people wherever they are. We hope many of them choose to come and work at IBM, but there are thousands and thousands of jobs, particularly in the tech sector, going unfilled because people don't have the skills they need. Working together, we can provide those opportunities to people. We also can provide opportunities to people who have traditionally been left out of the tech sector, women, underrepresented minorities, service people who are returning from military service, who have similar jobs in the military and need those civilian certifications. So there are lots of groups of people who can benefit from this, and our economy as a whole, both in the US and globally. I think, we hope people will come and work for us, but if they work for another company in the sector that's really lifting all boats, they can start at a smaller, medium-sized company, get some more experience under their belt, and then come work for an IBM or an Amazon when they're later on in their career. So I think this, right, it's not a binary option. It's not a this or that, it is a both and.
Well, I want to turn to Ardeen on that, because I think for a lot of folks, it's hard to grasp that Amazon, like IBM, is doing a lot of this work for folks that may or probably will look for jobs elsewhere. Can you talk a little bit about why you've moved in that direction?
So I think Lydia did a great job talking about the ecosystem. It really isn't or. We know that people will come to Amazon at some point in their career, and we hope that they stay with us, but it may just be a stepping stone to something else. And we're honest, we may not have the career option that they're interested in. There aren't opportunities for registered nurses at Amazon, for example. And so it's important for us to help people on that career progression path. And why is that? Because it's the new minimum wage. Career progression is what moves people, lifts them up and moves them up the wage scale. And when people move up the wage scale, you raise the tax revenue in communities and schools improve. You create a pipeline for employers that are in the community and other employers join. So there's this great flywheel effect that happens when we all work collectively to upskill that talent together. And so it isn't inside or outside, it's both.
So obviously, not everybody watching this event works at a company with the scope of your two organizations. What sort of advice would you offer to folks from smaller businesses? And does the urgency behind these new initiatives that you've started apply to their work as well? And let's start with Lydia.
I think absolutely it applies to their work. I think the great thing is programs like the one that we've launched are ways for them to offer, free training to their clients or their customers or their employees. I think one of the things that we know is there are great free options. It's hard to find them all in one place. And it's hard to find them with a trusted brand, knowing that that's a badge or a certificate or a skill course that they can take and use when they're seeking the next job. And I think that's where we can work together as employers, is honoring these high quality training options so that when people are coming to our companies and seeking the next job, we're recognizing that it isn't just degrees that show what people know and are able to do, that it is alternative, routes and skilling and skills training that really is how people are preparing for jobs today. And making sure that we have policies in place that don't keep people out of the market because of policies around how jobs are sorted and how candidates are selected.
Well, we've barely scratched the surface with both of these programs. I would encourage everyone to go to the websites to look at all the various pieces of it. We'll obviously be watching it closely in the coming months and years. But I'm afraid now I'm going to have to turn it back to our host with the U.S. Chamber Foundation. But thanks to you both for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Ryan Craig, Managing Director of Achieve Partners and author of books like A New You, Faster and Cheaper Alternatives to College. And we're here for a conversation on digital skills and the future of workforce. I'm joined, lucky to be joined this morning by Governor Eric Holcomb of Indiana and Ravi Kumar, the president of Infosys. And Governor Ravi, we know the labor market is in a very interesting place now, perhaps unprecedented in the history of the Republic. We have over 10 million unfilled jobs and arguably tens of millions of workers who are unemployed or underemployed or unhappily employed. And I've written a great deal about the fact that what's missing in large part in our existing ecosystem of post-secondary education and workforce development is the digital skills that employers are increasingly seeking. So many good jobs and entry-level jobs are demanding digital skills, platform skills, SaaS skills that are simply just not being taught or delivered in our colleges and universities and workforce programs. So I want to start this morning with Ravi because often it's more enlightening, I think, to start on the employer side, because that's obviously what's driving the demand for talent. So Ravi, you broke ground on the Technology and Innovation Hub and then the U.S. Education Center in Indiana in 2018. Can you talk about what prompted Infosys's need to launch a hire, train, deploy model in the U.S.?
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you for that question. Thank you to the U.S. Chamber for hosting us. Governor Holcomb, good to see you again. Always a pleasure. And actually, I get deeply inspired by every conversation I do with the governor. I happened to do one recently in New York, and that just stepped up on what we have to do in the state of Indiana. So Ryan, way back in 2017, we started this journey with the state of Indiana. I want to set the context of what Infosys is all about. Infosys is a tech and digital services company which partners with large enterprises on the journeys, on the transformational journeys. And for 40 years, we've been in existence, 35 plus years. We built hub and spoke talent models with large pools of talent in India. And that was a time when enterprises were using technology to enable their business, build systems, build scale. And that was the reason why the hub and spoke worked. For the last 5 years, we knew digital skills, rapid digitization of enterprises, and embedding software into products and services of every industry, every enterprise is going to be a reality. Even before the pandemic happened, that was happening, and with the pandemic, it got accelerated. So we believe that as tech becomes so core, every business becomes tech. I call it software is the new alchemy for every business. We felt like we have to go from hub and spoke to distributed talent pools and build capabilities in the markets where we are represented. And the US is a principal market for us. So one of the reasons was that. And then we started to go back to the roots of Infosys, which is hiring from schools and colleges. We built the largest corporate training university in India almost 30 years ago. And now that we're going to this distributed talent pool, we had to build it in our principal market in the US. It so happened that the governor and I were in India together, and the governor saw our training facility in Mysore, and he didn't allow me to leave till I actually told him that we will set up that center in Indiana.
Can you just describe for the benefit of the US audience what that looks like? Because I don't think that hire and then train model is as prevalent here.
So absolutely. So once we pivoted that to the state of Indiana, because there was great academic ecosystems locally, it was in the middle of the United States, so we could access all our client installs. And because we hire from schools and colleges and we build capabilities rather than just hiring from the market, we felt that was a great location. Going back to your initial comments, Ryan, there are 10.5 million open positions in the US, 8 million people available for jobs. And there's a great reshuffle happening today. That great reshuffle is 4.5 million people are leaving every month and finding new jobs. Social mobility is missing. We knew all of this was coming. It's just got accelerated with the pandemic. We felt it was a phenomenal opportunity to build that feeders of talent pools. So that was one of them. The second reason I would say is tech is going to be more insourced because tech is so core. It's not non-core for any business. Once it is insourced, this 100-acre training facility, which is the old Indianapolis airport, which we took over, the first phase of it is already done. We are just about to inaugurate it. We felt like it is not just about building feeders for ourselves. It's also about building feeders for our clients who would actually hire technology capabilities themselves because it is core. And the third reason is skills are very short-lived in the digital era. So you have to intertwine education and work together. That's the new template. The old template where the industrial revolution set, where education was there for the first 25 years and work was there for the next 50 plus years, that template is out of the window. Education and work are going to be intertwined. Reskilling infrastructure has to be built by enterprises. We felt like we could be that partner which enables reskilling for enterprises and building digital capabilities. We are in an unusual era. We have more jobs of the future. We have people looking for jobs, and the bridge between it, the reskilling infrastructure required, nobody's investing. So we believe academic ecosystems, local policy makers like the governor and the state of Indiana, and enterprises like Infosys have to build this skilling infrastructure in an era where education and work is going to be intertwined, skills are going to be short-lived. So tech is core, tech is going to be insourced, and skills are short-lived. These three reasons are the reasons why we built this. We are not only going to do this from STEM schools, we will do it from community colleges. I will come to that in a minute once the governor has his comments on this panel. And we're going to hire people without degrees, and we're going to hire non-STEM skills. So all of that is in motion in the state of Indiana.
So just last question before we turn to the governor. So you're actually in the U.S. Education Center, you were hiring for cognitive skills, you're hiring for communication skills, you're hiring for technical aptitude, but you're not necessarily hiring for the specific technical skills because you're confident that you have the ability to train on those skills and make them productive, both for Infosys and then ultimately for clients. Is that correct?
Spot on, Ryan. In fact, if you read some of the recent articles I've written about how we are moving from degrees to skills and how we are moving from skills to potential. Hire on potential based on learnability and attitude and aptitude, and train them for 8 to 12 weeks, and you will be ready for a digital job, applying digital skills to every function in an enterprise. That's what we're doing. We're hiring from community colleges. We're hiring with people who have who want to do a mid-career shift. They have, they're stuck in a low potential job. They want to go to a high potential job. We want to hire for them. One of the reasons why the great resignation is happening today, the great reshuffle, is in industries where there is no upward mobility.
That's right.
Unless we create upward mobility, we're not going to live the American dream. And the only way that will happen is to build reskilling infrastructure, hire on potential, and allow people to flourish in enterprises and flourish in industries where the social mobility is. People who are leaving jobs are in industries where the social mobility doesn't exist. And we think there is a hidden jewel of talent available there in this 2-year associate degree community colleges, and people without a degree. 50% of the United States workforce doesn't have a degree, and they're stuck on those jobs. But you know what? They have the potential to transition to these high skill jobs and the digital jobs you spoke about, as long as we actually reskill them. And that's our responsibility as a consortium, as a collaborative consortium with local policymakers.
That's great. Thanks, Ravi. Governor, this is a remarkable initiative. I'm not aware of any other state initiative that is so vast in its ambition with a single employer partner. So maybe you can start by telling us what was the need you identified that resulted in this partnership?
Well, thank you, Ryan and Ravi. You're preaching to the baritone section of the choir here. I kept nodding my head like I was in the front pew. Look, when Ravi mentioned that we were in Mysore, and I got to witness firsthand, seeing is believing, when we're sitting in a boardroom and I'm seeing folks from Anthem and Eli Lilly and company coming into the room to say hello, that they're headquartered here in the state of Indiana and they're training around the world. Obviously, we had to address the workforce shortage, which, when you distill it down to its essence, and the reason why is because we have this lack of proper skills to fill the jobs that are there. This was pre-pandemic, and it's certainly been excited by what's gone on over the last almost 2 years. And so we're trying to make sure that the proper skills, that those are the link to success for an individual, for a community, then for a state. And what we don't want it to be is the missing link. And far too often we were hearing from employers that were saying, if we could just find the people. And Ravi talks about the great resignation. And there's also this great reflection going on about what is it that I want to do with my life. And that kind of that pyramid of poverty level, lower middle class, upper middle class, all the way up to the affluent. What we're trying to do is, and what Ravi and I talk about every time we get together, is how do we push people up that pyramid, or how do we invert the pyramid, quite frankly, and grow the pie, which grows opportunity. And again, it goes right back to, are we supplying employers with the workforce that they need? Because every sector, as Ravi said, every sector is plus tech. And if you don't have that expertise, if you don't have that skill set, then you're competing against people who do. And either you grow or you die. So we have sought to align everything that we do coming from what is going to give the individual the best shot at going as far as they want up that pyramid, and making that pathway, light that pathway so it's very obvious. And we hear from so many employers that say, look, I got PhDs and 4-year degrees working on projects that someone who just has the proper credential or certificate could fill. And I'll hire another, 100 folks with associate's degree. So this is critically important we got 30 private colleges and universities. We've got obviously Indiana, Purdue, Indiana State, and a community college that's in everyone's backyard in the state of Indiana. And so we've got to align those curriculums and make sure that they're aligned with the providers like Emphasis, who has gotten this, for the last, since I've known them and before that. And it's why I got to know them, because they had already cracked that code. Now we've got to figure out how we get all the partners together, and that we're making the right investments, that we're expressing the commitment from a state policy perspective, from a state funding perspective, cutting out the bureaucracy, making sure that if it's funds, that those funds are getting directly to employers to train. If it's funds to partner with Emphasis, that they're getting there, so that obviously we can continue to grow the pie.
It's great. One of the things that makes me so excited about these hire, train, deploy models like Ravi and like this initiative is that they remove the friction for the candidate. Unlike a traditional post-secondary journey where you're required to pay tuition and take on debt, and then there's no guarantee of an employment outcome. Here you're hired first and then trained. And that's huge for diversity in terms of underrepresented populations, in terms of rural populations. Governor, can you speak to the importance of providing additional pathways for diverse populations?
Absolutely. And that's what why that connectivity is just so important. Again, we have to make those investments, whether it's broadband internet, making sure their awareness is there. We have to get at this to remove every single barrier that's been out there, perceived or real, in every community. And so we address this as kind of one Indiana for all, whether it's rural or our urban centers, and make those connections. One thing that comes out of that every time that we make these investments, one thing that comes out of it, there's no better testimonial than someone who's gone through this program. And the validity of their endorsement is much stronger than mine could ever be. Mine almost sounds rhetorical to some. Theirs is real. Theirs is transformational. And so obviously, when folks go through a program like this, they're also gaining this. And this is why we've made investments into computer science and said it's going to be absolutely necessary that every school in the state of Indiana is teaching computer science. So they're getting those critical and those creative thinking skills that go along with what Emphasis is emphasizing. And the confidence that they get from an early age, that talent pipeline, and plus the industry direct pipelines that are attached to Emphasis, that are attached to our colleges and our universities, those are those investments that make such a big difference. And obviously the quality of candidates. We live in this time where no longer can we kind of blame it on, if you just sent me a better product, I could be more productive. We're all in this. It's all an ecosystem. And so we're all attached. We got to blur those lines between the corporate, state government, philanthropic too, for that matter, and make sure that we're promoting a good product along the way that's relevant to today's needs.
That's great. Ravi, maybe final question. They hire, train, deploy. You can attract a more diverse population. How does a more diverse workforce help you serve your clients better?
So Ryan, this is a very interesting time. First of all, the experiment we did with hiring without degrees, hiring for potential, hiring from community colleges, we find that talent to be much more hungry, aspirational, to live the American dream, as I call it. They're much more sticky to us because we've potentially invested onto their professional.
You provided the pathway, sure.
That's right.
Yes. And interestingly, we have created this learn, earn, and work model. I call it the digital apprenticeship. And that has really created a pipe of talent which did not exist, because these are people who were stuck on those jobs. They were working on a teller or working on a check-in counter of a retail company. And that feeder of talent will go through an apprenticeship, which means they go through the back office, they go through the shop floor. And then as they work with us, they get credits from the university. They start to equip themselves for the core digital jobs. I can't find a better model, because they have actually gone through the back end to go to the front end and actually deal with core capabilities. So this is almost 50% of the workforce of the US. It's
Right.
and I think this fixes the social upward mobility challenge. And that is, I think the governor very rightly pointed out, this great resignation is a phenomenon, because people are asking this question, why am I working? It's no longer about when and where to work. It's about why am I working? That question, it raises the hope of the system. It raises the pool. It's a win-win for the local communities, win-win for employers like us, where we build this viable, scalable models, win-win for our clients, because this talent is sticky and more hungry to do more.
That is great. That is great. Well, Governor Ravi, I mean, what a great legacy to the U.S. Education Center in this partnership. If it could be a harbinger of sort of a renaissance of apprenticeship in America, I think that we'd really benefit from that in these new pathways to socioeconomic mobility and economic advancement. So I want to thank you both for your vision and execution on this. It's super exciting. You're helping change the lives of tens of thousands of Hoosiers and hopefully Americans as these models spread across the country. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ryan, and to the Chamber.
Thank you, Ryan, and thanks to the Chamber. And Governor, thanks for your leadership, as always, inspirational, and I hope we replicate the Indiana model in every other state.
I'm looking forward to hosting you in here soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm Carolyn Cawley, and I'm president of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation. Thank you all so much for being with us at this program today. It means a lot to us because all of our work is focused on one thing, which is that we know what a job means to a person and a community and a family, and we're doing everything we can to help close that gap between people without jobs and jobs without people. And it's super to be able to spend time today with Mike Rowe. You, of course, know his name. You probably know all about his journey around America, looking at America's dirtiest jobs. What you might not know is that he's now onto a new show about how America's working and going around and talking to people about the work they're doing to get this economy going. So it's a perfect fit and a perfect conversation that we'll have. Welcome, Mike, and thanks for being here.
Carolyn, thanks for having me. I'm going to do everything in my power to be as interesting as humanly possible.
Well, you have one of the most interesting and frankly funniest bios that I've ever read. I loved hearing about your first job and how it got you on this journey. It sounds like you've been a champion of tradesmen and skilled trades for a really long time. Can you talk for a minute about your interest in this and how you became such an advocate?
Sure. I mean, the short version is I came by it honestly. I grew up next to a guy named Carl Noble, who happened to be my grandfather. He only went to the 7th grade, but he could build a house without a blueprint. He could take anything apart and put it back together. He had that chip, that just allowed him to do any trade-related task easily and intuitively. That gene, tragically, is recessive. I did not get it. But I did grow up next to him. And as badly as I wanted to follow in his footsteps, he was the guy who told me from an early age, look, anybody can be a tradesman. It's really a state of mind. It's a way to approach whatever your job is. But you, my friend, these are his words, you, my friend, should get yourself a different toolbox. And to this day, I think it's the best advice I ever got. It was the advice that got me into the entertainment world. And I've been there for 40 years. But I've always approached what I do with the mindset of a tradesman, a jobber, I have a great appreciation for tasks with a beginning and a middle and an end. The feedback that comes from that kind of work is easy to overlook and impossible to overstate. And it's one of the things I've learned over the years working shoulder to shoulder with these men and women. As a group, they know something the rest of us have forgotten, and it's something worth ruminating on.
They sure do. You know, we have a lot of conversations and we host a lot of summits like this to examine the workforce problem. And a lot of people will talk about the demand problem or the supply problem or the skills problem. I've heard you talk about the misperception problem.
Sure.
Right? Is that something you've encountered a lot as you went around and really dug into these jobs?
Oh, it's endemic. You know, if you're really trying to get this thing distilled, and if you're trying to answer the question, why do we have nearly 11 million open positions right now? And why are we still lending money we don't have to kids who will never be able to pay it back to push them into a 4-year degree? I mean, the irony is just heartbreaking because so many of those open positions don't require the very credentialing that we're currently obsessed with. You can start to see the tautology at work here, but fundamentally it is myths and misperceptions and stigmas and stereotypes that affirmatively conspire to keep millions of people from giving these opportunities an honest look. So in my world, you know, the first thing you have to do is entertain. You have to do something that's going to get people to watch. But once they're watching, there are a lot of ways you can confront those stereotypes. And there are a lot of ways without lecturing, without a polemic, without a sermon, that you can make a more persuasive case for why these opportunities have so much value. And in a nutshell, that's what Dirty Jobs aspired to do. That's what my current show aspires to do. That's what my foundation does. Honestly, Carolyn, I've been doing the same show for the last 20 years. I just changed the title every 7 or 8 years, but the mission is the same.
What are some of the most common misperceptions or stereotypes or judgments that you encountered?
That you can't make a great living mastering a trade. My foundation, so far this year, we give away $1 million a year, specifically to people who want to master a skill. And then a few years later, I circle back with those people and I tell their stories, because invariably, what I think the country really needs to see is a steady diet of people who have prospered as a result of mastering a skill that's in demand. So it's really storytelling, you know, and it doesn't matter if it's on the TV or on my Facebook page. I got 6 million people there, and once a week, I'll introduce them to somebody we assisted. I just told the story. You'll love this. Chloe Hudson is her name. She's in her late 20s, beautiful woman who was going to be a plastic surgeon, balked at the $400,000 cost of medical school, applied instead for a welding scholarship from my foundation, and today is making nearly $200,000 a year working for Joe Gibbs Aerospace, doing something she truly loves with not a penny of debt. My job is to tell her story, right? That's how you confront the stigmas and stereotypes with real people who have actually done it, who have actually lived it.
Well, consider it a standing invitation to come back one day with her. I'd love to meet her.
You will love her. In fact, we just did a documentary on her. It's called Trading Up, and everybody will love it, right? We did it in conjunction with Prager University, but it's just a quick 20-minute look at a non-traditional face of success in the welding community. And that's the other thing we have to do. We have to, when I talk about stereotypes and stigmas, I'm talking about, if I say plumber, the image that comes to your mind, he's a 300-pound dude with a giant butt crack. That's not the plumbers. That, you know, that there's so much more to it. 6-figure jobs, balanced lives, satisfied work environments. It's all there. We just have to do a better job of telling their stories.
Well, we need more of that. You know, speaking of your foundation, I read that you have a really focused intent on work ethic. And that just seems to me like a highly specific value-driven piece of the scholarship. And so I'd love to just ask you to talk about that. It sounds like you got some of that from your grandfather.
I think I did. Work ethic, delayed gratification, a positive attitude, these are the pillars, and this isn't new. Most of us who grew up with a work ethic will be familiar with all that. How those concepts became the enemy fascinates me, because they have become the enemy today. You can look in so many different cases, and you can find people affirmatively opposed to things like personal responsibility and work ethic. I don't want to be a scold about it, but I felt like somebody needed to make a case for those old bromides and platitudes, because they matter. And besides, there are athletic scholarships out there, and endless academic scholarships and artistic scholarships. We wanted to do something to identify and celebrate people who were really affirmatively interested in showing up early, staying late, and mastering a skill that's in demand. Not a skill that they necessarily identified as their wish fulfillment, not a skill that lines up with their notion of a dream. With respect, I don't care about any of that. My dream, remember, was to follow in my granddad's footsteps. I couldn't do that. I had to zig and zag. And as it turns out, when I found the thing I was competent at, it wasn't the thing I had aspired to do. I had to work at it until those things lined up. That's a part of work ethic too. So we've awarded about $5.5 million through work ethic scholarship programs. And at the risk of shameless pluggery, I would invite your audience to check them out at microworks.org. Please recommend a scholarship to anybody you know who wants to learn a skill that's in demand. It's what we're all about.
Well, thank you. Will do. We've been preceded on this program today by a couple of bold-faced name CEOs, the Secretary of Labor, a union leader. And I think that you're bringing something to it that is quite different, which is storytelling, as you called it. What story would you tell to business leaders and employers who are struggling to fill these jobs today?
I think I would remind them that in this binary time in which we find ourselves, it's very tempting to look at every problem in terms of this or that, blue collar or white collar, right? Labor or management. It's a very limiting way to think, in my view, because the skills gap is not just about, as you said in the intro, finding jobs for people and people for jobs. It's reminding the other 300 million people in this country the degree to which they're reliant on the people we're talking about. And that is where I think the great disconnect lives today. And that disconnect is part of the thing that makes it so difficult for so many companies to recruit effectively. We're not properly gobsmacked when we flick the light, when we flick the switch and the light comes on, or when we flush the toilet and the poop goes away, right? These things are miracles. And so much of what's happening in the construction industry and so much of what's happening out there, I think we've seen over the last year and a half of lockdowns, how dependent we are upon this evolving definition of essentiality. So it's just a long way of saying it's not a conversation between employers and potential employees. It's a much broader, it's a macro conversation that involves the whole country, because a balanced workforce is all we're talking about is national security, and I just don't think you can overstate it, right? So that, because I'm in the broadcasting world, I kind of default to that message. It's not just about the skill. It's not just about the employee or the employer. It's about all of us.
Yeah.
And, this is a mosaic. It's like a thread on a quilt. If you tug it, you'll see all kinds of weird ripples. and that's what we're seeing in our economy. That's what the skills gap is. It's a thread in the quilt that's come loose.
Well, as we often heard during the pandemic, everyone's job is essential to their family, right? And their community.
It's ironic for me, because Dirty Jobs was the mother of all essential working shows. And for years, I made the point that essential workers were those who labored out of sight and out of mind and did something that we all benefited from. I've changed my way of thinking. That word's dangerous. We're
Mhm.
all essential to somebody, even if it's just ourselves. And there are no jobs that I've ever seen anywhere that aren't essential.
Yeah.
But the language, Carolyn, it matters. You know, essential is just one example, but higher education is another. When we start talking about education that's higher, we immediately presuppose that there's a whole bunch of other opportunities that are lower.
Lower.
Like apprenticeships, like
Mhm.
trade schools, like community colleges.
Mhm.
All of this is of a piece. And the way we think about education, the way we think about the definition of a good job, you know, those things are in our control. There's a long list of stuff we can't control, but
Right.
those things we can, and we have to.
Mhm. Well, thank you for the work you do. It's really been great to talk to you. Can we do a quick lightning round? I just have some fun questions I want to ask.
I thought that was the lightning round.
Okay, quick.
All right.
When you were doing dirtiest jobs, what was the dirtiest job that you did? Like, where did you just get the most filthy?
Well, we did 300, and it's tough to beat replacing a ruptured lift pump, which resides in the bottom of a 5-story silo in a wastewater treatment plant. When the lift pump ruptures, the silo fills with poop because people keep flushing their toilets, and men in woefully inadequate Tyvek suits must doggy paddle to the ruptured pump. I climbed up on this thing. They lowered a cable from a crane, and I hung on for dear life as they winched the whole 4-ton motor out of that lift pump chamber. And Carolyn, the sound a ruptured lift pump makes when it breaks a seal of poop that's been holding it to the floor, that'll haunt your dreams.
I would say that was a dirty job.
Top
Okay,
5.
if you could be a skilled tradesman, if you had to stop TV and stop storytelling and stop being a star, what would you be?
I build bridges. You know,
Is that right?
Yeah, there's just something so elegant. You know, I'm looking out here at the Golden Gate Bridge, and I've worked on the Brooklyn Bridge, and I've worked on the Mackinac Bridge, and those people who work on those bridges, you know, it never stops. Painting a bridge, it takes 3-4 years, and as soon as you're done, you start over at the beginning. But building the bridges, the riveting, the steel, the iron, there's so many different construction trades that come to bear with all of the engineering and all of the sweat and all of the, plus metaphorically, I like it, you know, in a world where we're profoundly disconnected from so many things. Bridges, they make sense to my brain.
Thank you so much for your time. One last question. Will you come back sometime?
Oh, I don't think so. Are you kidding me? Of course I'll come back. I'll come back later in this presentation if you want. I'll come back tomorrow if you'll have me. I love you guys.
We're going to continue this conversation, and really, I'd love to meet some of those scholarship recipients. I think they're really role models for all of us. So thank you for what you're doing.
I've only got 1,400, so careful what you wish for. I'll provide you with a list of names.
You got it. Done.
Take good care.
Thanks a lot, Mike. Bye-bye.
Hello, my name is Neil Bradley, Executive Vice President and Chief Policy Officer at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and welcome to the 5th in our series, Common Grounds, where we bring a Republican and Democratic leader together over a cup of coffee to talk about some of the most pressing issues facing our nation. Today is a special edition of Common Grounds because it's done in conjunction with the Chamber's Talent Forward program, where we're spending the day looking at the issues affecting our workforce, our educational systems, and how we help every American become the best that they can be in life and in education. I especially want to thank our friends at Campus Coffee for continuing to help promote this series and help us put it on. They put the grounds in our Common Grounds event. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Compass Coffee, you can check them out at one of their 12 locations in the Washington, D.C. area. Founded by 2 Marines, it's one of the traditional success stories of American small business that we hear about all across this great country. Today, I'm honored to be joined by 2 distinguished leaders, one from the Senate, one from the House, one from the Democratic Party, one from the Republican Party. They have diverse backgrounds, but they share a common passion when it comes to education and workforce training issues. Today, we're joined by Senator Bill Cassidy from Louisiana. He served in the Senate representing his state since 2014 and joined after an illustrious career in the House of Representatives. He is a physician by training, and he's a Republican. We're also joined by Representative Raja Krishnamurthy, who comes from Illinois. He represents the outside areas of Chicago. He's a Democrat. He served in state government and now federal government. We're excited to welcome both to the stage. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Hey, thanks for having us. I really appreciate it. So I'm always amused whenever anyone calls me distinguished. I figure right off the bat, you're losing your credibility.
Well, you know, we're happy to share it. So we start every one of these conversations with the toughest question of all. Are you a coffee drinker? And if so, how do you take it?
Raja, you go first.
Hey, well, thank you so much for having both of us on. And yes, I am a coffee drinker. One of my staffers suggested that our office mantra be rise and grind. And so, yes, I love coffee, and I take it with cream and sugar. I joke and I say, if you can make it look like this color, then we're on to something. So we're good.
Senator, how about you?
I drink about 10 cups a day. Now, whenever I started pre-med, I have ADD. I couldn't focus on anything. So I started pounding down coffee. My mother at the time, my mother told me at the time, if you don't like coffee, learn to drink it black. That way, when you're old and you need to lose weight, you won't have to give up cream or sugar. It was the best advice. I eventually learned to love it. I don't drink caffeinated coffee now because, it's just better for my marriage. I have 1 cup of caffeine in the morning, and the rest of the day I drink decaf coffee. In my younger, wilder days, truly wilder days though, I would drink 10 cups a day, and life was pretty rocking and rolling.
Coffee does that to you. I have to admit, my coffee addiction started on Capitol Hill. I was an intern, also for a physician member of Congress. And my first job every morning was to get up early and make the grinds and make coffee. Because Lord knows we didn't want anyone coming in without the option of being caffeinated. So let's jump into today's topic. I mentioned at the outset that you come from different political parties, different backgrounds. You approach issues often very differently, but yet both of you have seized on an issue around access to information about educational outcomes. And you've both been working together kind of in pursuit of policy solutions in this particular area. I'm curious what led you to your interest in this issue and why you think it's important. So Senator, we'll let you go first.
Yeah, so obviously your title of this is double entendre, common ground. Raj and I, one, he's got friends and family in Louisiana, and so we've spoken before and have a bit of a connection. But two, I think we both would say that we want the individual American to have the power to make the best choice for his life or her life. And when it comes to education, right now, the educational establishments have almost all the power. You're 18 years old, you can borrow all kinds of money. You can get these Pell Grants, and people inundate you with things trying to appeal to you to come to their school. And you're not aware that if you go into this curriculum, you'll end up $250,000 in debt, working in a coffee shop because your degree is effectively worth nothing. Nothing against working in a coffee shop, but when you graduate with $250,000 in debt, you might want a little bit more. Versus if you go to this place, which might be a lot less expensive, into a curriculum which might be a little bit more difficult, but ultimately you're going to make a lot more money. So we are united in that. We want that young 18-year-old or that older 30-year-old to have all the information she needs to make the choice best for her future. And so much depends upon it. We're united there. Raja, I think I'm speaking for you, but I think I'm speaking correctly.
Should I jump in?
Please do, yes.
Hey, the senator is absolutely 100% correct. He and I share the exact same view about this, which is, folks need to understand exactly what the outcomes will be for the education that they are about to embark on And oftentimes it's an expensive education and an expensive proposition so that they can make an informed choice. And I think that if they don't have that information, they end up with some bad consequences potentially. One is what the senator said, which is you could end up in a job that doesn't fit your degree or what you purchased, and then you end up with a lot of debt. And you may end up in a situation where, you know, you have all this debt hanging around your neck, but it becomes an albatross for the entire economy because you are more likely to not have a high-paying career. You are less likely to start a household, get married, buy a house, do all the things that we need to have the economy humming. The last thing I would just say is employers also don't get the benefit of your talents if you went down the wrong track and not the one that maybe allows you to realize your best potential and where your talents and passions might lie. And so we continue to have a huge skilled labor shortage as a consequence. So there's a lot of things that happen when people pursue the wrong career track because they don't have the information to pursue the right one.
So your former colleague, Congressman Paul Mitchell, was really passionate about this issue. And, you know, sadly, he passed away this past summer. But up until, frankly, up until his death, he was preaching this message. And he found colorful ways of saying it. One of my favorites was that it's easier today to find out more information about the quality and reliability of a washing machine than it is to find meaningful information about degree and college program outcomes for a meaningful career. How do we fix that? How do we change that? What needs to change in the system so that we have more information about one of life's biggest decisions than we have about, you know, the quality of a washing machine? Congressman, how do we fix this?
Well, thank you for mentioning Paul Mitchell. He was a dear friend of mine, and you're right. Very up until his very day that he departed us, he was very concerned about this issue of people having as much information as possible to make a good informed decision about their future and the purchase of their education. And I think the way that we fix this is by removing any impediments that are in the law that prevent educational institutions, including four-year colleges, community colleges, trade schools, and the like, from being able to publish student outcome data by major, by college, all the things that you would otherwise need to make a good decision in buying an education. And today, believe it or not, there are laws on the books that ban or prevent educational institutions from doing just that.
So if there's ever been a time when a set of regulations favors the seller, if you will, and not the purchaser, it's now, what Raja just said. By the way, all the information is there, already collected by the federal government. It is just not presented in a coherent fashion to the student. So we have the College Transparency Act that would allow an online search to be made easily to compare schools. One example of just the power of this, there's a school in Georgia that follows, I don't know, 60 different or maybe more factors on every one of their students. They have eliminated racial disparity in graduation rates. They have found that there might be a young person who is $500 short of their last semester of tuition. If they forgive that $500, the person graduates. If they don't forgive it, the person drops out, has all the debt, not the degree, and the trajectory of their life, instead of like this, is like that. I like to tell folks, every student should be able to look in a mirror, whatever he or she looks like, whatever their socioeconomic background, whatever their, you name it, they should be able to go online and say, I am a white guy who is 18 years old, from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and my parents have this median income and this educational achievement. If I enter this curriculum at this university, I will, on average, borrow this much money, have this much debt, and make this much when I graduate. If I go to this university in this curriculum, I will have that much debt and I'll earn that much, and I'm less likely to graduate, period. The student should know that. And that's when we give power to the student. And the fact that they don't have it, I think, is an indictment of our current system.
So I'll play devil's advocate here for a moment, because not everyone has come to the conclusion that both of you all have come to. And one of the arguments that we hear is around privacy. So how do you protect student privacy but still solve this problem?
First, Raja, I'll go first this time.
Go ahead.
First, the federal government already collects this information. All you're doing is amalgamating it from different sources. And then it's presenting. And you can de-identify the data. It's not like, hey, it's Bill Cassidy who went to LSU and you can see how Bill did. No, they just take everybody that looks like me, everybody that looks like you, like Raja, like you name it, and they de-identify, present that. I find oftentimes privacy is an important issue, really important. But usually when people are throwing up things like privacy and it's de-identified data that's already being collected, they're really concerned about money. And they really, either they don't understand the issue, or two, they're concerned about money and the fact that their university may not fare well. I hate to be cynical, but when you look at the default rate on student loans, how many people drop out after getting their Pell Grant, et cetera, the current system is not working well. The taxpayer's on the hook. The student who drops out is on the hook. We need to do better.
Congressman?
No, the senator said it absolutely right. We're talking about we're basically talking about data that has been, so just to let's give you an example so that your viewers know exactly what we're talking about. Let's say we're trying to get an accounting major at the University of Illinois. And let's say that we are a veteran and the veteran wants to know how much do veterans who attend University of Illinois trying to get an accounting major make. Well, what University of Illinois does is they will provide the data in an aggregate form for all the veterans who went through the accounting course at the University of Illinois, and then give the average salary for those particular veterans. It does not say what veteran A or veteran B earned. And so it's really anonymous in terms of the data that's afforded, and it doesn't really reveal individual data, which obviously is a concern, and we should all be concerned about that. I would just add that, as the senator pointed out, a lot of this data is already collected, and so we can anonymize the data and make sure we can double scrub it and make sure that we don't reveal unintentionally anyone's particular details, but there are ways to get around this issue and still provide people with the information that they need to make a good purchase decision.
So I want to go back to something, Senator Cassidy, because I think you've solved the privacy challenge, and I want to thank you both for tackling that head on. You know, when we talk about this a lot, we think about it from the talent acquisition standpoint, making sure that people are on a good career pathway. But Senator Cassidy raised something that I thought was kind of interesting, the ability to use this type of information to solve other problems, to target graduation rates, to close disparities. Is there talk a little bit about some of the other benefits that frankly we might see just in personal and societal outcomes if we simply made this information public?
Should I jump in on this one, Senator? It's the benefit of competition. I mean, think about the galloping rate of tuition at all of our schools, whether they're state schools or private schools across the spectrum. And parents and students are just wondering, where does this end? Well, think about what happens when you start to give people data and the marketplace starts to understand what are the actual outcomes associated with purchasing this major at this college? Again, taking Illinois, for instance, University of Illinois has wonderful majors, wonderful student outcomes. And so I would like to see those, measured against perhaps another private school in another state that perhaps Illinois residents are attending for the same degree. I'd also like to see how community colleges do for these exact same degrees at a much lower cost. Now, once you have those outcomes on the table, it's going to be very hard for another institution to charge maybe 2 or 3 or 4x what a community college charges for the exact same degree if the outcomes are the same, or even if they're better at the community college. So that's one thing that I think you're going to start to see, which is all of a sudden there's going to be some market discipline brought to higher education prices. The other thing is I think employers are going to benefit by knowing which schools are producing the best outcomes for certain degrees that they are trying to hire in. And so I think it really helps the students, it helps the employers, and it will really, to me, it's going to be the great leveling of the playing field in higher education. I don't know, what do you think, Senator?
Totally with you on that. And it's a way to transmit market information to the student. So for example, if a student graduates in nursing and she's going to go to a community college program, maybe get her bachelor's at a state school, so she's going to end up with $20,000 in debt, but she's going to make $80,000 to $100,000 when she graduates. The market is sending the information that nursing is far more valuable at this point. On the other hand, if she decides to major in gender studies and spend $50,000 a year between tuition and books and travel, etc., she could end up $200,000 in debt. And unless she goes to graduate school, there will not be a job in which she uses her degree. So the market is doing a feedback, giving her the information that she needs to make the best choice. Now, she may decide to go into it, but into gender studies because she's terribly interested in it. But she'll go in with her eyes wide open and not feel kind of tricked at the end when she doesn't get a job and she has all this debt. So I'm totally with Raja. This is the way the market speaks to the individual. And frankly, it is how the universities begin to align their curriculum, because you create demand. Boy, nurses are doing great. I'm going into nursing. You're going to expand your number of nursing slots if you wish to keep on getting those students. So I think it's that virtuous cycle that information leads to.
Well, we're in the middle of college football season, and I can't help but think, I was imagining LSU and University of Illinois or my Oklahoma Sooners, but I couldn't help but thinking about during this conversation that I feel like I have more information about our college football teams and their statistical records than we do about the education that we're all actually paying for. And that's something that's got to change. So I want to give you each 30 seconds to close out here. But before I do, I just want to say thank you. When we created the Common Ground series, the whole idea was finding these issues where people could set aside partisan differences, could even work across House to Senate, Senate to House to help solve some of our nation's problems. And both of you have done that in spades today. So Congressman, we'll go to you for any last thoughts before we wrap up today.
Well, I just want to say a special thank you to you, the chamber. I want to say a special thank you to my good friend, Senator Cassidy, who just does a terrific job collaborating with us on this and other workforce development issues. This to me, I was a small businessman before I came to Congress, ran a very small company. And one of our toughest challenges was finding talented people to take the positions that we had. And I think the irony of today's economy is that we have roughly 7 million people who are unemployed, and we have almost 10.5 million job openings. And so, long term, as we try to match people with the jobs that are in demand, we have to make sure that they have all the data necessary to purchase the education that's best for them, and that's also in demand. And I think that as the senator said, I think more data is always better than less. And I can't wait for the day that we actually have a website where people can just search in an easy to use manner for the best education for themselves and thereby unlock their full potential as men, women, and as Americans. Then we will unlock America's true potential, in my humble opinion.
Hey, Raja, I'm totally in agreement with everything you said. Neil, I'll add this. The College Transparency Act is merely a means by which we can lower the cost of education, make it more likely that someone graduates with a degree which earns them money, and they have a fulfilling life. The aggregate of that will benefit our society. But let's not, maybe there should be another, but there's another such session as this, but there's other ways to achieve that as well. There are high schools in Louisiana where the student can graduate certified as an emergency medical technician, or as a nurse's assistant, or as a welder, and I could go on. It's dual enrollment in community or technical colleges. They graduate with the ability to earn significant dollars as they work towards their next degree. There's dual enrollment regimes, not just for so-called, these sorts of skill sets, but you can go get your college calculus out of the way. So I do think we need to think globally, aggressively about how do we lower the cost of education for the students and get them on a track where they're actually making real dollars in something which they enjoy doing. College Transparency Act is one of those things. There's others as well. That's our challenge. We have to address that challenge.
Well, Senator, I think you may have found our next topic for our next Common Ground series. I just want to, on behalf of the Chamber, thank both of you for stepping out and leading in this effort, to demonstrating how our elected leaders can come together and solve problems. And, put us in, Coach. We want to help try to get this done and help solve this problem on behalf of the American people. To our audience, join me in thanking Senator Cassidy and Congressman Krishnamurthy. Thank you for your work. Everyone who's tuning in today, follow these guys, follow up on what they're doing, make sure you understand the positive developments that's being made in this and so many other issues on Capitol Hill. A special thanks to our friends at Compass Coffee, and please join us again next time for our next Common Ground series. Have a great day.
Thank you both. See you, Roger.
Thank you.
See you, Neil.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Neil.
With you and hope you will let us know what you thought of today's program by participating in our post-event survey that you are receiving right now in your chat box. A big thank you to Deloitte, IBM, and Tutris, our Talent Forward conference sponsors, organizations that lead by example and are deeply committed to this work and are making a difference in very important ways. Thank you to all of our Chamber and Chamber Foundation colleagues who carried out today's program, especially Nick Malcheski, Hillary Hom, Jana Champeau, Jenna Shrove, Clara Pino, Kathy Mumford, Caitlin Thomas, Hillary Crow, Stacy Lukens, and Kyla Holland. And to the CEW team, Joe Davis, Ashley Capo, Kyle Butler, and Jake Fuller, and most importantly, Jamie Francis. Great job today and all the days leading up to today. I'm in awe of your work ethic, your dedication, and your talent, and I couldn't be luckier to call all of you colleagues. One last thank you to all of you. I know you stuck with us a little longer than we had anticipated, but we thank you for staying with us. Take care, everyone. Until next time.